If I were to ask you what the first music video was, what would you say? You might be tempted to suggest Video Killed the Radio Star, the first video ever aired on MTV. Or maybe earlier promotional videos like Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, the Beatles' Strawberry Fields Forever, or Bob Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues sequence from the D.A. Pennebaker documentary, Don't Look Back. And these would all be great suggestions, but the reality is that the history of music on film reaches back even further than that. It reaches back before the golden age of Hollywood, when America's biggest stars were singing and dancing in Technicolor spectacles. It even predates the early days of animation, when Fleischer Studios was rotoscoping Cab Calloway into surreal Betty Boop cartoons. For as long as film and recorded music have existed, artists, inventors, and businessmen alike have been trying to find ways of combining the two mediums. One of the earliest works that might be called a music video made its debut all the way back in 1894. It was called The Little Lost Child. The Little Lost Child was the vision of an electrician named George Thomas, who saw the potential in a piece of technology called the magic lantern. The magic lantern was a loose term for a number of different types of projectors that started to catch on in the mid-1800s. By projecting light through glass slides, magic lanterns could enlarge and display images to audiences. Thomas realized that this technology could be used in tandem with music. He came up with the idea of projecting slides with lyrics and images alongside a song. He then took this concept to sheet music publishers Edward B. Marks and Joe Stern, who saw its promotional potential and allowed Thomas to use their song, The Little Lost Child, for this experiment. Thomas went about creating what he called an illustrated song. This illustrated song consisted of 10 slides depicting the narrative of the little lost child. The illustrated song made its debut during the intermission of a minstrel show by Primrose and West at Manhattan's Grand Opera House. Now, a quick aside, Primrose and West were blackface performers. Much of the early history of the music video is directly tied to the racist practice of minstrelsy, which was dominant in American pop culture at the time. That is a deeply complex topic, so I'm not going to dive fully into it here, but I'm going to give warning, this is not the last time it's going to come up in this video. When The Little Lost Child made its debut, the projectionist accidentally put the slides in upside down, drawing laughter from the audience and undercutting the sad lyrics of the song. Once the projectionist corrected things, however, people realized the power of image and song together, and The Little Lost Girl became a sensation. A new industry was born, as Marks and Stern sold 2 million copies of the sheet music. Not much cultural memory of illustrated songs remains, even though they were common across America well into the 30s. But here's the thing. Is an illustrated song a music video? Not really. For one, it doesn't actually have video. The images used in The Little Lost Child were still, but that's sort of the nature of technology and media. It's easy to look now and say, well, that's not technically a music video, but the reality is the question of what actually counts as a music video has been in flux for a long time. Do the intricate dance numbers from Hollywood's golden age count as music videos? What about the visually experimental variety show performances from the 70s? How do we take stock of more modern experiments like Arcade Fire's interactive Wilderness Downtown? And what about TikTok and other contemporary short-form video? Music video is really a loosely defined term whose implications have changed constantly throughout history and are still changing to this day. Even the most common understanding of what a music video is relatively new, only coming about with MTV in the 1980s. Despite this loose definition and constant change, music videos have had enormous impacts on the culture industry over the past century. So I think we should talk about them. Over the course of this 7-episode series, I'm going to walk you through the entire history of the music video as a medium. Along the way, we'll take a look at the changing technologies that shaped the art form, we'll explore the visionary musicians, artists, and directors who carved their own path and defined much of modern culture. And we'll continually press up against that question of what actually counts as a music video. Welcome to Hit Record. If we can't count the illustrated song for not having video, we might be able to find some of the predecessors to music videos by looking to silent film. This sounds paradoxical, But the reality is that there has never been film without sound. On December 28, 1895, the Lumiere brothers debuted their first public film screening, showing 10 short films documenting everyday life. And these films were accompanied by a live piano score. We don't actually know what was played at that landmark first showing, but it's easy to imagine jaunty ragtime accompanying the simple slapstick of a piece like L'Arroseur Arrosé. As film caught on through the turn of the century, it became standard practice for theaters to live score films with pianists, organs, or even live orchestras. Some theater organs even had full-on sound effects built in. But sound accompaniment does not a music video make. A lot of this is where the groundwork for film score was laid. And while film scores have music and video, they're not exactly music videos. Still, there was a distinct musicality to the performances of many of the early silver screen stars. Some of these early films had set scores, but it was also common practice for in-house pianists to improvise the visuals using cue sheets as guides. And that brings us to one of the most important aspects of the music video, at least in my mind. I think one potential criterion for our definition of a music video is repeatability. A music video is a singular art object, something that remains the same each time you watch and listen. Of course, this isn't a strict rule, and there have been and will continue to be exceptions, but I think it's a good starting point. To find that sort of reliable repeatability, we need to fast forward to the synchronization of sound and film. By the early 1920s, both film and audio recording technology had reached a level of quality and reliability, but nobody had quite figured out how to properly synchronize them. This led to an arms race as companies sought out methods of combining sound and film. In the end, Western Electric came out on top with a piece of technology called the Vitaphone. The Vitaphone used an electric motor to synchronize the film reels with wax disc recordings, allowing for movies with sound, which were soon known as talkies. One of the first talkies to take America by storm was The Jazz Singer, featuring Al Jolson, who at the time was far and away the most popular singer in the country. And if you know anything about film history, or anything about Al Jolson, we are once again encountering that issue of blackface minstrelsy. Most of The Jazz Singer is actually silent, but it features musical numbers with sound that see Jolson display his signature belting vocal style.
Goodbye. Don't cry.
These numbers are more potential candidates for the first music video. They have repeatability, they feature deliberate, interesting visual language, and they can even be watched today on YouTube like you might watch any other music video. The Jazz Singer was an evolution of the musical theater tradition, clashing it head-on with film and setting up decades of musicals to come. But is a musical section from a wider work really a music video? Maybe. There's definitely examples of musical sections being used as their own video, but I tend to think that if we're looking at The Jazz Singer, then the film itself is more the art object, rather than the ain't heard nothing yet scene. For something closer to our modern understanding of the music video, we can look to 1929's St. Louis Blues. Directed by Dudley Murphy and starring the Empress of the Blues, Bessie Smith, St. Louis Blues is a powerful short film, highlighted by a striking performance of the titular song. Unlike The Jazz Singer, which was adapted from an existing show, St. Louis Blues was designed outward from one song. That song's original writer, W.C. Handy, produced the film and specifically asked Bessie Smith to appear in it after hearing her rendition of the song. The film uses visuals to deepen the story of the song, creating a new art object that exists beyond a single song or film itself. The whole creative ethos behind this piece really looks a lot like the process behind music videos today. And while it is longer than just the song, there's no shortage of modern music videos that extend beyond the music, adding narrative skits and interludes. Dudley Murphy would follow up on the success of St. Louis Blues with Black and Tan, another short film featuring the music of Duke Ellington and his orchestra. As the film industry boomed, these kinds of musical shorts became commonplace, playing before feature films or during intermissions. At the same time, a new art form was entering a golden age: animation. After a decade or so of silent experimentations, the potential of sound synchronization became apparent to early animators. One such animator was a man named Walt Disney. After seeing The Jazz Singer, Disney was determined to bring sound into animation. He and Ub Iwerks created a musical short film called Steamboat Willie. The film combined a number of older songs, including the vaudeville piece Steamboat Bill and the folk song Turkey in the Straw, with some original scoring. Steamboat Willie isn't a music video per se, but it trailblazed new ground with combining visuals and music. The abstraction afforded by the medium of animation adds a new dimension to this combination of sound and vision. After the enormous success of Steamboat Willie, Disney and other animation studios began to pump out musical cartoons. This era saw the birth of Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes, cartoons that were intrinsically tied to music. And in 1931, Fleischer Studios pushed these proto-music videos even further by collaborating with the singer and bandleader Cab Calloway. They used their patented rotoscoping technique to capture Calloway's electric stage presence and transfer it to film. These collaborations were strange and surreal, treading the fine line between funny and creepy. The performance in St. James Infirmary Blues is particularly striking with its odd retelling of Snow White. By the mid-30s, these animations were everywhere, and the arrival of color film brought a new dynamic to the medium. One of the most successful animation series was Disney's experimental Silly Symphonies, which further pushed the abstraction of music on film. These animations embodied the symphony orchestration with dynamic characters and shouts of color. Once again, it's up for debate whether these animations count as music videos per se, but their influence undoubtedly shaped the medium's visual language. To this day, music videos are one of the richest sources of experimental animation, and animation has time and time again proved a robust and exciting way to depict music visually. Once again, we press up against the difficult history of American racism with the conversations of these cartoons. Many of the cartoons of this era were based on tropes from minstrel performances, and some were so outright racist that I can't show them on screen without this video being taken down. This legacy is important to discuss because it deeply informs the traditions and practices of the music video industry. The path laid down by this systemic racism would continue to rear its head well into the MTV era, with the channel originally not airing videos by black artists. And it persists in music to this day. Acknowledging and unraveling these things is an essential part of telling this story. By the 1930s, both the film and music industries had secured their hold on American culture. We were still decades away from the modern music video emerging, but its early predecessors were everywhere. And as the golden age of Hollywood came on, music on film would rise to play an even bigger role in the culture and media of the day. New talents in song and dance were hitting the screen and stealing hearts. Behind the camera, directors, choreographers, and cinematographers were about to push film to all new levels and create a visual language that would shape music videos for decades to come. And as technological innovations increased media access, televisions came into the home, and new generations would find themselves closer than ever to the pop stars of their day. On January 26, 1933, the Hollywood producer David O. Selznick wrote a memo to his assistant, describing a screen test he had just watched. The memo read, "I am uncertain about the man, but I feel, in spite of his enormous ears and bad chin line, that his charm is so tremendous that it comes through even on this wretched test." The man in question was a dancer named Fred Astaire. The 32-year-old Astaire already had a renowned career on Broadway, but tides were shifting in America, and it was clear that Hollywood was where the country's cultural future lay. Selznick spotted Astaire's natural charm and saw his potential to carry RKO Pictures into this new world. Meanwhile, a young actress named Ginger Rogers was seeing her star rise in Hollywood. After starting in vaudeville, she moved up to Broadway and then made the jump to the silver screen, appearing in a number of pictures throughout the early 30s, including the acclaimed 42nd Street. RKO thought that Rogers might pair well with Astaire and gave it a shot in 1933's Flying Down to Rio. Rogers and Astaire weren't given top billing, but they stole the show. Tim Satchel's Astaire the Biography, Fred Astaire himself recalled their unlikely chemistry. Ginger had never danced with a partner before. She faked it an awful lot. She couldn't tap, she couldn't do this and that, but Ginger had style and talent and improved as she went along. She got so that after a while, everyone else who danced with me looked wrong. After the success of Flying Down to Rio, RKO decided that Astaire and Rogers should become on-screen partners, an idea that both of them hated. In a 1934 letter to his agent Leland Hayward, Astaire shared his frustrations at the thought. "What's all this talk about me being teamed with Ginger Rogers? I will not have it, Leland. I did not go into pictures to be teamed with her or anyone else, and if that is the program in mind for me, I will not stand for it." Astaire and Rogers would go on to do 10 films together, including many of the most celebrated pictures of the era. All of these films were musicals, centered around magnificent dance numbers starring the duo. Astaire was a driven perfectionist, dancing with a precise, aggressive grace that he himself dubbed outlaw style. Rogers was an actor first and a dancer second, yet she looked effortless keeping up with Astaire, contrasting his outlaw style with a lighter, more playful approach. As Katharine Hepburn put it, he gives her class, she gives him sex appeal. One of their greatest successes was 1935's Top Hat, which includes the magnificent Cheek to Cheek. In Astaire the Biography, screenwriter and director Garson Kanin recalled the experience of seeing Top Hat for the first time. "Never before and never since have I seen an audience stand up and cheer at the end of a picture. A standing ovation for a movie? I sat through the picture twice, and that evening insisted on going again and taking my brother with me. The next evening, I was back again." Even in the midst of the Great Depression, Rogers and Astaire brought Americans out to theaters in droves. Meanwhile, the music industry was in the middle of a historic collapse. In 1927, record sales across America had reached 104 million. By 1930, they were down to just 10 million. People were unwilling or unable to spend money to listen to music at home, and yet tens of millions were drawn to the spectacle of music and film together at the theater. And so it was that the film industry continued the cultural and aesthetic march toward the creation of the music video as we know it today. The impact that Rogers and Astaire had on musical film is enormous. Astaire had final say on all of his own choreography and used that to push a very specific vision of musical film. Astaire's approach was a grounded one. He tried to integrate dance numbers into the plot of the film, and he wanted them shot in as few shots as possible, trying to keep all the dancers on the screen at the same time. Speaking with Film and Theater Today in 1950, Astaire explained, "Either the camera will dance, or I will." This approach is a lot more akin to Astaire's Broadway origins, and it mimics the feeling of watching live theater and dance. This influence can be seen all over more contemporary music videos, especially those centered around dance, like Beyonce's iconic Single Ladies, or even OK Go's Here It Goes Again. But at the same time as Astaire was working, another approach was developing. This one used dynamic camera movements paired with opulent, large group choreography, and preferred elaborate stylization over any sort of realism. To find the origins of that approach, we need to look to one of Astaire's contemporaries, Busby Berkeley. Like nearly everyone else in early Hollywood, Berkeley came up in vaudeville and Broadway. After a prolific career choreographing for the stage, Berkeley found his way into Hollywood in the early 30s and discovered he could make things bigger and more elaborate than anybody had ever dreamed. He was fascinated by geometrics and realized that when you choreograph enormous chorus lines, something spectacular happens. The details of individual dancers begin to fall away, and the massive bodies abstract into striking, visual depictions of music itself. There was almost no focus on the precision or accuracy of the dancers. Berkeley understood that in huge numbers, such details faded away, and the sheer mass of human motion seized attentions. He was especially fond of using elaborate single-camera shots, swooping his camera through legs, around bodies, and anywhere else that it needed to be. This kind of complex, single-take choreography is something seen all over modern music videos, and these huge dance numbers foreshadow elaborate works by Michael Jackson, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, or Beck. Berkeley's most celebrated work might be 42nd Street, which displays some of his most elaborate choreography, as well as his signature use of cranes for brilliant overhead shots. In contrast to Astaire's approach, Berkeley had little to no interest in integrating his numbers into the plot of the films. In an interview with Kenneth Turan, Berkeley said, "I never bothered with the directors who did the dramatic parts of the pictures. Most of the times I'd never even see them. They did their job, I did mine. Of course, my selections were more expensive. We once figured out they cost about $10,000 per minute on the screen, and people yelled about that, but I hollered them down." This single-minded dedication toward creating kaleidoscopic collisions of sound and vision is essential in the progression of the music video. As the golden age flourished, Hollywood films veered into surreal territory, and by the late 30s, this was helped by a new addition to the filmmaker's toolkit: color. The earliest version of Technicolor dates back to 1916, but it wasn't until the late 30s that color really started to make its way into film. Famously, The Wizard of Oz literalized this transformation from black and white to color. It used a spectacular, vivid palette that paired perfectly with the jaunty, whimsical music. This foray into fantastical worlds seized the imaginations of America. It pushed filmmaking even further beyond the present and toward the place of abstract stylization that dominates so many music videos. And The Wizard of Oz had more tangible influences too. Michael Jackson's first foray into video was 1978's The Wiz, a reimagining of The Wizard of Oz. Nearly all the earliest films to use color were musicals, including Disney's more ambitious animated forays, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Fantasia. Fantasia, in particular, is a key landmark when it comes to music videos. Unlike Snow White, which is built around a plot, Fantasia is an anthology that essentially consists of 8 standalone music videos set to iconic pieces of classical music. The ambitions and experiments of American cinema were peaking in the early 1940s, but the world was plunging into war. This didn't stop the progression of musical films per se, but it created a distinct shift in their tenor. Disney and Warner Brothers both transformed into propaganda arms for the government, producing a number of musical propaganda films, including Der Führer's Face. The music industry started promoting war bonds and creating short reels to send overseas and entertain soldiers. And it's in this dark moment that we see a new technology emerge, one that marks the first attempt at creating a distribution model for music videos. The Panoram was a sort of visual jukebox containing a miniature projector and a loop of film with 8 3-minute songs on it, known as soundies. Panorams could be found in public places across America, and anybody could pay a dime to watch one of these videos. More than anything we've talked about so far, the soundies themselves are a clear, direct precursor to the music video. Or maybe they're just music videos themselves. It really depends on your definition. They fit most of the criterion we've established. They had both visual and sound, they're clearly repeatable, and they displayed singular art objects not tied to a wider picture, and the addition of visual and sound does create something new in these. Many of these were just straightforward videos of an artist lip-syncing or miming performance, but some even had little conceits and narratives built in.
I told the superintendent that you're mighty independent. I wrote you in a letter that you ought to know much better. And now I'm dialing your number. And all I'm gonna talk about is sweet, sweet slumber.
Watching these soundies, they feel a lot like modern music videos. So then why didn't they catch on? Why is the lineage of soundies a weird, forgotten footnote? Well, because of the war. The production of panorams required important materials needed for the effort, including rubber, so it was stopped by late 1941, and America had to make do with the existing panoram machine. Still, soundies held sway over America well into the late 40s, with artists of all sorts making appearances, including the likes of Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong, and Nat King Cole.
Got a penny, got a telephone to Jenny, and I just got 4 cents to my name.
The technology that truly spelt the death of the soundie was the same technology that would eventually birth the modern music video: television. Early televisions existed as experiments and novelty items before the war, but in the post-war economic boom, they became cheaper, more reliable, and more widely available across the Western world. By 1954, more than half of all houses in America had a television, and on the first day of that year, the first standardized color broadcast went out in the US. Similar advances were happening all across the Western world, just as a new generation was starting to come of age. Unlike cinema, which was built around longer, more elaborate productions, TV allowed for more flexibility with short-form entertainment. And unlike the panoram and soundies, television could be watched from the comfort of your own home. It added a social aspect, as everyone would communally watch things and then gather to talk about them, whereas with a panoram, you could really only share it with people who were around the jukebox. Some of the first proto-videos to appear on television were a series of short, pre-recorded performances broadcast in the early 50s called Snyder telescriptions. These telescriptions displayed familiar faces like Cab Calloway, and also highlighted a number of country artists like Tex Williams, Merle Travis, and Bob Wills. Country music in particular thrived on TV in the 50s. Gene Autry brought his singing cowboy character from radio and films into television with a show that ran from 1950 until 1956. The show would see Autry perform musical numbers, making use of the television to create an intimate connection to his audience.
Sing me a song of the trail when shadows creep and day is getting long, he sings a tender lullaby.
But even as TV was taking over, musical films were finding life once more in the late 40s and early 50s. The rhythm and blues star Louis Jordan was an early adapter of these proto-music videos. He'd appeared in 14 different soundies throughout the 40s and released a successful musical short, Caledonia, in 1945.
Walking with my baby, she got great big feet. She long, lean, and lanky, and they had nothing to eat, but she's my baby, and I love her just the same. Crazy about that woman, 'cause Caledonia is her name. Caledonia! Caledonia! Oh, what makes your big head so hard? I love
After
you.
that, he launched into a career of musical feature films. He released a number throughout the back half of the 40s, and these films stand as predecessors to the music video, but also helped create a model for future films by artists like the Beatles. In Hollywood, the post-war economic boom brought on another era of grandiose spectacle. Gene Kelly picked up the tap torch from Fred Astaire, dancing his way into the spotlight in pieces like Singin' in the Rain and An American in Paris. Singin' in the Rain is a particularly interesting film, as the piece itself stands as a meta-commentary on the introduction of sound to film, looking back at the early days of Hollywood with a slightly cynical, nostalgic lens. It wasn't that Astaire had gone away, however. In the later phases of his career, Astaire was still pushing the boundaries of dance. His 1951 number, You Are All the World to Me, from Royal Wedding, is a fantastical piece with creative use of practical effects to make Astaire defy gravity. The The room that Astaire dances in that video is built in an enormous 360-degree rig with all of the furniture glued in place. The rig rotated as Astaire danced his careful choreography to create a spectacular illusion. This no doubt had audiences of the day asking how did they do that, just like people would generations later when watching Virtual Insanity or Denial Twist. The 50s are awash with iconic musicals, each serving as vehicles for beloved stars. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes cemented Marilyn Monroe as a cultural icon, using vivid color palettes and striking visuals that Madonna would pay homage to years later. A Star is Born continued the crossover between the film and music industries with a musical film about musicians and film stars. And by 1961, a film adaptation of West Side Story was displaying large-scale choreography that would eventually influence Michael Jackson. But there was something else going on in 50s film. Where much of the 30s were about actors and dance stars performing in musical numbers, the 50s saw more and more musicians crossing over into the world of film. The most important of these was Elvis Presley. Elvis was launched into stardom in 1954 when his take on That's All Right introduced much of white America to rock and roll. And while his rise started on the radio, it was television and film that truly launched him into the stratosphere. Elvis's pure, undeniable sex appeal and lurid dance moves enraptured the youths of a new generation. And his rise was clearly tied to his visual performance. When Elvis first appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show on September 9th, 1956, the camera was framed above his hips so the audience at home couldn't see the dancing. But he still works it like few could. When he appeared on the show later that year, the camera gives a full view, and you can understand why a generation of teenagers fell in love. Elvis's electric stage presence galvanized teens who were hungry to see more of their dreamboat superstar, and he was happy to oblige, jumping into Hollywood to create more elaborate visual spectacle. In 1957, Elvis appeared in Jailhouse Rock, a film that has a loose plot about a dancing country singer, but really serves as a vehicle to display Elvis's singing and dancing.
Everybody, let's rock. Everybody knows they'll rock. Who's dancing to the jailhouse rock? Number 47.
The music of that film was released as singles, and the title track became a chart topper. And in that way, I think that Elvis's videos are closer to music videos than those of Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly. He's a musical artist using the medium of film to add a visual flair to one of his singles. The entire rock and roll movement was undeniably visual, with artists like Bill Haley, Fats Domino, or Chuck Berry frequently appearing in TV performances alongside elaborate dance numbers. A flood of rock and roll movies of varying quality saturated the market with visual depictions of the day's biggest stars, and many smaller artists who hoped to launch into lucrative careers on the back of the rock and roll tide. The way that musicians were imagining themselves was beginning to shift. There had always been visionaries like Louis Jordan and Cab Calloway who saw the potential of mixing sound and video, but by the late 50s and early 60s, visual aspects were becoming essential to any performer's repertoire. All of the pieces were in place for the existence of music videos. You had the technology to easily combine sound and video. You had a generation of musicians, filmmakers, and on-screen talents who had experimented with that combination. You had color and abstraction. You had several methods of distribution that allowed for short-form content. And to top it all off, you had a brand new musical movement with the financial backing and cultural clout to bring all of these things together. But despite all this, the music video as a medium still had yet to solidify and grab hold of American culture. But as the 60s were dawning, a new generation of musicians and filmmakers were about to change that. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, strange, bulky machines that looked like this started to show up in nightclubs and bars across France and Italy. Known as the Scopitone in France and the Cinebox in Italy, these machines were visual jukeboxes, successors to the American Panoram machines from 20 years earlier. Unlike the Panoram, which consisted of black and white clips with poor audio quality, the Scopitone and its competitors could present video in full color with hi-fi audio. They had greater storage capacity with a selection of up to 36 different short films, and best of all, audiences could even choose which films to watch. These devices could have delivered us into the music video age nearly 30 years before MTV. But for all of their promise, they faced unique challenges due to the nature of their medium. Bob Orlowski, a Scopitone archivist, explained to Collectors Weekly, "They had to grab people's attention from across the room. They are the only type of film I can think of that's produced for people who aren't watching them. In general, nobody is choosing to look at the Scopitone machine." Because of this reality, the filmmakers creating Scopitone films had to rely on sharp color palettes and eye-catching visuals, which often included scantily clad women doing suggestive dances. These Scopitone films combined performance with loose narrative conceits and abstract visual metaphors to create something that pretty definitively read like modern music videos. Like so much in music history, they borrowed from vaudeville and burlesque, combining cheeky comedy with suggestive, raunchy acts. Big names like Serge Gainsbourg and Johnny Hallyday made appearances on the Scopitone, and figures popped up behind the scenes, hoping to take advantage of this new medium. The most prolific of these was André Boyer, better known as Mammy Scopitone. Over the course of just a few years, Mammy Scopitone directed more than 600 Scopitone films, many of which were filmed in her own house. The rushed quality of these videos are a part of their unique charm. In her seminal 1964 essay, Notes on Camp, the cultural critic Susan Sontag declared Scopitone films to be part of the canon of camp, and it's easy to see why. The impact of this camp style on music videos to come is enormous. Scopitones and similar machines spread across Western Europe in the early 60s, highlighting local stars and beginning to embed the idea of music videos into the zeitgeist. In 1964, they jumped the Atlantic, with 500 machines being installed across America. The hype for these machines was big, with directors like Robert Altman directing Scopitones and Francis Ford Coppola throwing money behind them. A-listers like Bobby Vee and Dionne Warwick tried their hand at Scopitone films. One of the most striking American music videos to appear on the Scopitone was Nancy Sinatra's These Boots Are Made for Walkin', which sees go-go dancers stomping around a quintessentially 60s set in shiny high-heeled boots. A new era had arrived in the Western world, and it looked like the music video might arrive with it. Only, it didn't really stick. Scopitone films stand as an interesting historical note, and they had a pretty big cultural impact, but they'd mostly faded by the end of the decade. Why is that? Well, it has something to do with four lads from Liverpool. Expectations were high when the Scopitone hit the States, but it failed to meet them, and there's a number of reasons behind that. For one, the machines were incredibly bulky, broke frequently, and were expensive to fix. To avoid competition with jukeboxes, many Scopitones were put in cocktail lounges and adult establishments, a decision aided by the fact that most of them were funded with mob money. The Mafia ties also meant that a lot of B-rate artists with loose mob connections featured in the films. Altogether, this caused the Scopitone to miss out on the biggest, most important market of the time: teens. And that might be why, in 1965, the Beatles opted out of creating Scopitone videos and turned their attentions toward television, spelling the end of a format war before it could even begin. Throughout the early 60s, the Beatles had risen from the Liverpool dockyards to stir the UK into an epidemic of Beatlemania. Like Elvis before them, the Beatles and their management knew that the key to teenage hearts lay in attracting their eyes as well as their ears. They made their television debut in 1962 on a show called People and Places, and were soon making regular national appearances on British TV. But Beatles management had greater ambitions. The Ed Sullivan Show was a variety show that first aired on June 20th, 1948. Over the course of the 50s and early 60s, it had grown in popularity and become one of the most important and beloved shows in America. Every Sunday night, millions of Americans would tune in at 8 o'clock sharp to witness performances by the finest cultural creators in the country. Sullivan had musical guests of all persuasions on, and famously aired Elvis Presley to one of the largest audience shares in American television history. Sullivan gained a reputation as a cultural kingmaker, and the Beatles knew that his stamp of approval could launch them into the stratosphere. But Sullivan's team wasn't that interested. Previous British acts hadn't had success in the American market, and he didn't see why the Beatles would be any different. Everything changed on Halloween 1963. Ed Sullivan was flying through Heathrow Airport and witnessed Beatlemania firsthand. He realized this was Elvis all over again, but decided he could shortchange the Fab Four. He offered manager Brian Epstein a single dollar to have the Beatles perform on his show. Epstein countered with a shrewd offer, accepting a minimal show fee in exchange for 3 appearances, with top billing on each. And so, on February 9th, 1964, The Ed Sullivan Show opened, with the Beatles performing All My Loving. More than 70 million viewers tuned in to watch. The Beatles had arrived in America, and with this arrival, they had cemented television as the medium that was going to carry the cultural weight of a new youth movement. There was just one problem. The Beatles became too popular. Everywhere they went, they were mobbed by fans, a reality the band comically depicted in their 1964 feature film, A Hard Day's Night. So they devised a plan that would let them do television promotions without having to deal with the inevitable mob that appeared each time word got out they were headed to a studio. The Beatles snuck away to Twickenham Studios in November 1965 and shot 5 promotional videos: Help, I Feel Fine, We Can Work It Out, Ticket to Ride, and Day Tripper. Tony Bramwell's Magical Mystery Tours has John Lennon recalling the idea. Just think, we won't be hanging around at the BBC for hours on end when we could be sitting at home quietly taking our drugs. Artistically, these videos were more straightforward and had more in common with the panorams of the 40s than the colorful Scopitone music videos. But commercially, they served the function that music videos continue to serve to this very day, promoting new singles. The Beatles were the most famous to record this kind of promotional video, but they weren't actually the first. At the start of 1964, a new show called Top of the Pops started airing on the BBC.
Yes, it's #1. It's Top of the Pops.
Top of the Pops was a chart review show that aired every Thursday evening. The only problem is that the charts were released on Tuesday, which meant a quick turnaround time and a hectic booking and shooting schedule as the show tried to fit in acts whose songs were rising on the chart. When an artist couldn't make a live appearance on the show, Top of the Pops would ask for a promotional video to air. One of the early examples of this was Roy Orbison's video for Pretty Woman, which leans into the simple conceit of the song and shows Orbison walking around Kensington Garden after seeing a beautiful woman walking down the street. Other acts were starting to see the potential of music videos and recording them for their own purposes. In 1964, the recently formed Moody Blues shot a video for Go Now. That video uses experimental visuals that predict those of Queen's iconic Bohemian Rhapsody a decade later. Top of the Pops was an institution throughout the 60s, but unfortunately, we can't watch many of the proto-music videos that appeared on it, thanks to a BBC policy of erasing old tapes. Similar chart shows popped up around the world, and more musicians were starting to think about short-form video content. One of the most important promotional clips filmed during this era came from Bob Dylan. During his 1965 tour of England, Dylan was followed by the documentarian D.A. Pennebaker. Dylan came up with an idea for a potential film centered around subterranean homesick blues and had Pennebaker shoot it. That video showed him holding up cue cards with selections of the song's madcap lyrics as it played in the background.
John is in the basement mixing up the medicine. I'm on the pavement thinking about the government. A man in a trench coat, badge out laid off, says he's got a bad cough, wants to get it paid off.
Dylan and Pennebaker shot 3 versions of this idea in a park, an alley, and on the roof of a hotel. Subterranean Homesick Blues is an important leap as it marks one of the first times that an artist completely did away with any pretense of performance, instead relying entirely on a clever visual conceit. It could even be seen as the birth of the lyric video, an art form that wouldn't flourish until the YouTube era. While this video was shot in 1965, it wouldn't come out until 1967, and by that point, other artists were experimenting with non-performance videos. The Kinks' 1966 song, Dead End Street, came with a dark comic movie that saw the band carrying a coffin through town, only to have a man emerge from the coffin at the end. The video ended up being banned from the BBC, marking the first in a long history of banned music videos. By now, color television was starting to take hold, which helped add a new dimension to these promotional films. One of the first acts to truly thrive on color television was the Monkees. The Monkees were manufactured teen icons, created for a sitcom that saw them frequently performing musical numbers on bright, psychedelic sets. Modeled after the Beatles, the Monkees would become youth icons in the mid-60s and go on to their own strange career as a genuine band. Meanwhile, the actual Beatles were continuing their practice of shooting promotional films. In 1966, they shot Rain and Paperback Writer, which shines in crisp color. And a year later, they'd follow this up with Strawberry Fields Forever, a bright and brilliant visual that used experimental film techniques and a strange, surreal set to reflect the psychedelic music of the song.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Fields.
By now, a cultural and musical revolution was happening on both sides of the Atlantic. Psychedelics had taken hold and brought with them a new worldview that encouraged rule-breaking and experimentation. One of the high watermarks of psychedelic music films came in 1968, when the Beatles released their animated Yellow Submarine. Like many musical feature films before it, Yellow Submarine ostensibly has a plot, but really it serves as a vehicle for experimental animated visuals. This is a continuation of the animated legacy started by Disney and Fleischer way back at the birth of film. Yellow Submarine presents itself as a hippie reimagining of a fairy tale and sees the Beatles traversing fantastical landscapes and diving into wild musical numbers. These music breaks can stand alone as music videos and display some of the most striking visualizations of sound seen to date. For all the creative success of Yellow Submarine, it's worth noting that the Beatles weren't actually that involved in the process and mostly greenlit it for contractual reasons. But honestly, that's a reality reflected in many music videos to this day. Some of the Beatles' psychedelic contemporaries were also trying their hat at promo videos. Pink Floyd shot a number of films that displayed their sort of British schoolboy comedy. These included See Emily Play and Arnold Lane, which was originally intended for Top of the Pops, but was cut from the show when the song fell from the charts. One of the more striking Top of the Pops appearances of the day was Fire, performed by the Crazy World of Arthur Brown in 1968. This demonic video saw Arthur Brown perform in a long robe, a flaming crown, and dramatic face paint. While the music is still rooted in hippie rock, the video marks some of the earliest introduction of heavy metal aesthetics.
You're gonna burn! Fire! To destroy all you've done!
By the end of the decade, the hippie movement was flaming out, but some of its disciples would completely transform music videos in the years to come. In his early career, David Bowie tried to ride the hippie wave, but had never quite broken through. In an attempt to display him to a wider audience, manager Kenneth Pitt encouraged Bowie to put together a promotional film called Love You Till Tuesday. Bowie envisioned the film as a half-hour reel with 7 songs showcasing his acting ability and distinct musical voice. But at the 11th hour, he decided he wanted to add a new segment for a song he had written inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey. That song was, of course, Space Oddity. Bowie and director Malcolm J. Thompson put together a cinematic video paying homage to the Kubrick film. Space Oddity is quintessentially 60s in aesthetic, and it shows a more serious approach to creating cinematic videos that was just on the horizon. But it would be some time before that video saw the light of day. Thompson clashed with Pitt, and the filming of Love You Till Tuesday ran over its tiny budget. Bowie's team couldn't find anybody to buy or air the videos, and they were shelved until 1984. But that wasn't the only Space Oddity video. After Bowie and Pitt parted ways in 1971, his label saw an opportunity to shoot a new video for the song. So in 1972, they brought in legendary rock photographer Mick Rock to shoot a short promo clip. By this point, Bowie had moved on from Space Oddity and was rather disinterested in the video. He was turning his attentions more toward the glam rock movement, which had exploded in the early 70s. To that end, Bowie and Mick Rock collaborated on a number of other films, which helped establish him as a visual icon. In 1972, he sported a sharp leather jacket and painted nails in Jean Jean. A year later, he appeared with a crisp powder blue suit and dramatic makeup for Life on Mars. As a movement rooted in aesthetic, glam was a natural home for pioneers in music visuals. Acts like Sparks and Alice Cooper shot their own videos in the early to mid-70s, and it was glam rock that birthed the most important promotional film of the pre-MTV era, Bohemian Rhapsody. In the fall of 1975, Queen released their operatic masterpiece. After a slow opening week, the song began to climb the British charts and earned Queen an invitation to Top of the Pops. There was just one problem. Well, actually two. First of all, the band had scheduled a tour date when they would have appeared on the show. Secondly, and perhaps more crucially, the band felt that such a grand, experimental song would feel wrong if they mimed it, as was common practice for Top of the Pops. In 2015, Brian May shared his full feelings on the program with the BBC. Top of the Pops didn't have a good reputation among musicians. Nobody liked it, really. It always seemed like a bit of a travesty. If your music had any meaning, it seemed to trickle away when you were standing on a box in a studio with lots of kids around. But you could hardly knock it, because it was the way that records were sold. So Queen decided they would pre-record their own video to send to Top of the Pops. Like most of the promo videos at the time, Bohemian Rhapsody was thrown together in just a few hours. Director Bruce Gowers was inspired by the cover for Queen 2, an iconic photo shot by none other than Mick Rock. The video opens on that recreated shot, then cuts to a performance-based midsection, which was pretty typical for the time. But as the song enters its experimental operatic breakdown, Gowers indulges in a bit of experimentation of his own. Using entirely practical effects, he elaborated on the striking shadowy imagery, throwing in a number of simple effects to enhance the visuals. One of these had Gowers pointing his camera at a monitor, which created stunning visual feedback as Freddie Mercury sang Magnifico. Because of the rapid turnaround time needed for Top of the Pops, the video was edited in just 5 hours and sent straight to the BBC. On November 20th, 1975, Bohemian Rhapsody aired for the first time, and the music world turned on its head. Speaking to the Mirror in 2015, Gowers remembered the moment. We all sat around a TV at the editing facility with our fingers crossed, wondering whether it was going to be on. And then wham, there it was. The crazy thing is, when it aired, the fans weren't the only ones seeing it for the first time. The band were too. Audiences ate up Gowers' experimental visuals and reveled in the indulgence of the song. Bohemian Rhapsody would continue to appear on Top of the Pops week after week. When all was said and done, it sat 9 consecutive weeks at the top of the charts, and even scored the coveted Christmas #1 spot. Few industry executives had faith in Bohemian Rhapsody when it was released, but they all took notice of the success of the video. Gowers' visuals were credited with helping the unlikely hit become one of the biggest songs of the year, and suddenly, the industry saw the true commercial potential of the music video. In the wake of Bohemian Rhapsody, more and more artists started shooting promo videos. Paul McCartney appeared in Silly Love Songs, Kate Bush arrived on the scene with Wuthering Heights, and Blondie channeled the disco movement in Heart of Glass. Disco might have been the artistic movement most on top of videos by the late 70s, with acts like the Bee Gees, Gloria Gaynor, and ABBA all appearing in promo films. After the roaring success of Bohemian Rhapsody, the modern music video had well and truly arrived. All that it needed was a consistent platform. And that was right around the corner, as we'll see in the next episode of Hit Record. In November 1979, Billboard magazine held the first ever video music conference. Pioneers of the new medium showed off some of its early triumphs, with clips from early adopters like David Bowie, Bruce Springsteen, and Blondie. Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody even made an appearance at the conference. In I Want My MTV, the uncensored story of the MTV video revolution, Craig Marks and Rob Tenenbaum document this conference in detail. During one of its panels, an executive named John Lack proposed his idea for a 24-hour music video network. After he finished, Sidney Sheinberg, then the president of the Music Corporation of America, stood up and declared, "We ain't giving you our fucking music." But Sheinberg was fighting a losing war. The groundwork for MTV was already being laid. Earlier in 1979, Michael Nesmith began production on a television program centered around music videos. Nesmith was no stranger to the idea of music on film. He began his career as a member of the Monkees, the 1960s boy band whose career was built on the spectacle of music on color television. And by the late 70s, Nesmith could see the way the cultural tide was shifting. He developed a 30-minute show called Pop Clips, which first aired on Nickelodeon in 1980. He then brought that show to Lack, who was an executive vice president at Warner. I Want My MTV has Michael Nesmith remembering showing Lack a music video for the first time, telling him that artists of all sorts were starting to make them, and that you could play them all day long. He said, like a music channel? Like music television? I think John was the first guy I ever heard use the words music television. Lack gave the green light for Pop Clips, and it became a sensation almost overnight. With the market research and audience response to back him, Lack set about making this vision a reality. And on Saturday, August 1st, 1981, at 12:01 a.m., music television began its first broadcast.
We have made it to start.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
After more than 80 years of visual and audio experimentation, of failed formats and forgotten mediums, the music video was here for good. The Buggles were first formed in 1977 as a collaboration between Trevor Horn, Jeff Downs, and Bruce Woolley. They were born out of a moment where the future seemed just around the corner, as synthesizers and digital recording were starting to take over the industry. They envisioned creating an unseen virtual band in response to this era, a bug-eyed robotic version of the Beatles to be called the Buggles. But that dream of anonymity disappeared when their first single, Video Killed the Radio Star, blew up. The duo got the call for Top of the Pops and decided to follow in what was now becoming a rich tradition, throwing together a last-minute video rather than having to actually appear on the show. Video Killed the Radio Star was shot in one day and edited in two on a budget of $50,000. In 2018, Horn told The Guardian about his vision for the video. "I'd read J.G. Ballard and had this vision of the future where record companies would have computers in their basement and manufacture artists. You could feel things changing." The video was a lot higher concept than a lot of the 70s promo videos, even seeming to predict future acts like Daft Punk, Gorillaz, or Hatsune Miku. It was highly stylized and used a myriad different visual effects to create its futuristic vision of the music industry. Video Killed the Radio Star was first broadcast on Top of the Pops in 1979, and then, 2 years later, it became a natural choice to kick off the MTV era.
Video killed the radio star. Video killed the radio star.
In my mind and in my car, we can't rewind, we've gone too far.
Music fans across America rejoiced as the channel hit the air, but the reality is that the early days of MTV were clunky, to say the least. It was plagued by technical difficulties, often featuring misplayed clips, dead air, and all sorts of other gaffes. On top of that, the channel didn't actually have that many music videos to air. In I Want My MTV, founding executive Tom Freston remembered these early stages. When we went on the air, we had something like 165 videos, and 30 of them were Rod Stewart. There were a number of factors contributing to this limited library. For one, MTV butted heads with the music industry. They refused to pay for video clips, so labels refused to license them. On top of this, many of the biggest artists of the day hated appearing on video. Video shoots tended to be long and dreary affairs, and a lot of 70s musicians were uncomfortable on camera. As a result of these factors, the artists who found early success on MTV were those who were willing to experiment, or those whose management was fine with pay and exposure. This meant that a lot of MTV's early programming consisted of experimental, cutting-edge artists who had already seen the potential in video before MTV ever went to air. Thus, a lot of acts who might have been a little too odd for the mainstream got to shine in the early days. Devo's Whip It saw regular circulation with its surreal sexual dude ranch. While it might just feel like weirdness for weirdness' sake, that video was actually a satirical take on Ronald Reagan's vision of America, making it one of the first to tackle a theme that would recur throughout the 80s. Talking Heads found success with their stunning Once in a Lifetime, released February 2nd, 1981, nearly 6 months to the day before MTV went on the air. That video saw David Byrne collaborate with choreographer Tony Basil to create strange, hilarious dance numbers inspired by religious sects and cultic rituals. These dances were performed by a sweaty David Byrne in a crisp suit, echoing the song's lyrical themes about the dissonance between the profundity of human life and the mundanity of dry, yuppie existence. Its regular circulation on MTV helped Talking Heads gain mainstream attention, and in the years to come, they would be mainstays on the channel. While many of the acts finding success were relatively new when MTV came on the air, there were some legacy acts who fully understood the power of the music video. One of these was David Bowie. Across 3 days in 1980, David Bowie shot one of the most expansive, mind-bending videos of its day, Ashes to Ashes. Made on a budget of £250,000, Ashes to Ashes is a sequel to his early career breakthrough, Space Oddity. It pairs retro-futurist imagery of Major Tom with shots of Bowie in an asylum, and Bowie playing the Commedia dell'arte character Piero. The video leaned into the aesthetic of Britain's new romantic movement, and aligned Bowie with the outsiders in society. It uses imagery inspired by H.R. Geiger's work on Alien to create a looming dread, hinting at Bowie's own reckoning with his life and career, and speaking to the strange new world he was entering into. All of this is augmented by cutting-edge visual effects that create a black sky and give the whole thing a strange pink hue. Ashes to Ashes would become one of the most influential videos of the era on a technical, aesthetic, and artistic level. These sorts of high-concept videos would define one stream of MTV, but at the same time, another aesthetic was coming up. In 1981, Duran Duran released a steamy, erotic video for Girls on Film. They put the video together in a deliberate attempt to break into the American market after hearing that some nightclubs had started playing music videos. They hoped to cause controversy for the sake of publicity, so they decided to create a deeply sexual video that pushed the boundaries of American cultural norms. In I Want My MTV, bassist John Taylor explained, "There's no plot to Girls on Film. The only plot was to set up some sexy scenes with girls. You don't need a plot to make a cool video. You just need something that catches the eye, that's sexy or amusing." The uncensored version of Girls on Film played on Playboy's TV channel and in nightclubs, while a heavily censored version made it to MTV. Using controversial sexuality as a publicity stunt would prove successful time and time again for music videos in the decades to come. Within its first year of airing, it was clear that MTV was having a cultural impact, but the channel was hemorrhaging money and struggling for advertisers. They weren't even able to get on air in two of the biggest media markets in the US, New York and Los Angeles. MTV executives needed proof of the channel's potential if it was going to stay afloat. So they went to one of their most successful markets, Tulsa, Oklahoma, and started poking around record stores. There, they found that stores were selling out of an underground act called The Tubes. The Tubes, as their name suggests, had always been a visual act, having come about in the mid-70s just as the music video was starting to solidify. They had little to no success on the radio, but made early videos that saw heavy circulation on MTV. This pushed sales for the band, and even had local radio stations changing programming to accommodate fan demands to hear their favorite MTV act. Upon seeing this, MTV had direct proof that they were driving sales and changing the industry. They took this data and were able to get the support to keep going, and over the next 2 years, everything accelerated. More artists were watching MTV, which meant the channel began to broadcast in more cities, which meant suddenly labels were allocating larger and larger budgets for music videos. The growing market for MTV helped bridge cultural gaps too, as it gave British acts a new route to break into that lucrative American market. But as MTV ascended through 1982, a sinister trend emerged. Through its first 2 years, the channel played almost no videos by black artists. But that's not because black artists weren't making music videos. As hip-hop was rising and funk was soaring, black artists continued to experiment in this new form. Many of these videos aired on a BET program called Video Soul. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5 recorded a video for their political protest song The Message. That video starred Melly Mel and Duke Booty and depicted them walking through the New York slums that they were rapping about. It was directed by Alvin Hartley, who also put together a video for Houdini's Magic Swan. These two videos represent some of the earliest videos in hip-hop history. By the end of the decade, that music would be taking over MTV, but when these videos were released, the channel wanted nothing to do with hip-hop, or really anything coming out of black communities. MTV had no problem playing Rapture by Blondie, who were some of the first white musicians to truly appreciate hip-hop. That song itself is a love letter to the budding hip-hop community, inspired by Debbie Harry's friendship with Fab Five Freddy. Originally, the video was even supposed to have a Grandmaster Flash cameo, but when Flash didn't show up, they instead tapped in Jean-Michel Basquiat. This video was one of the rare glimpses into black culture that made it onto early MTV, but even that was filtered through a white lens. Despite the fact that MTV was struggling with a limited number of videos to play, they featured almost no black artists. Famously, they even declined to play Rick James's Super Freak. The argument from MTV was that they were a rock channel, and there were no black artists making rock videos. Whether intentionally or not, MTV were continuing a legacy of racial segregation that has deep roots in both the music video industry and the music industry at large. And James was not about to take this silently. During the 1981 Billboard Video Music Conference, he rallied against MTV, overtly calling out their racist practices. He tried to bring others to his cause, but people were afraid of causing a stir and having career repercussions. It wasn't until 1983 that James would get a public ally in this fight, in the form of none other than David Bowie. During a sit-down interview with Mark Goodman on MTV, Bowie overtly challenged the channel's programming discrimination.
I'm just floored by the fact that there's so few black artists featured on it. Why is that?
I think that we're trying to move in that direction. We want to play artists that seem to be doing music that fits into what we want to play for MTV. The company is thinking in terms of narrow casting.
That's evident, but there seem to be a lot of black artists making very good videos that I'm surprised aren't used on MTV.
Well, of course, also we have to try and do what we think not only New York and Los Angeles will appreciate, but also Poughkeepsie or Midwest. Pick some town in the Midwest that will be scared to death by Prince, which we're playing, or a string of other black faces.
That's
and black
very
music.
Interesting. Isn't that interesting?
You know, we have to...
James and Bowie put a crack into MTV's color barrier, and soon thereafter, Michael Jackson would shatter it to pieces. Jackson had experimented with video before MTV, making his feature film debut in The Wiz before appearing in simple disco promo videos for songs from Off the Wall. But in late 1982, he released an album that would launch him to heights that no artist had reached before, and quite possibly no artist may ever reach again. Thriller. Today, Thriller stands as the single best-selling album in music history, with reported sales north of 70 million copies. And this success was directly tied to Jackson's forays into video. The first video from Thriller was Billie Jean, directed by Steve Barron, who was quickly making a name as one of the preeminent video directors of the 80s. When he was put in touch with Jackson, he had already directed dozens of videos, including the Human League's Don't You Want Me, which is a quintessential piece in developing the look and feel of 80s videos. In his memoir, Egg and Chips and Billie Jean, Barron recounted how the video came together. He had the idea for a visual concept based on the myth of Midas, where an artist would touch objects that lit up as they performed their song. He brought this idea to Jackson, who loved it, and the pair went forward on a budget of $50,000. This limited budget meant that rather than having light-up pressure plates, the set could only have certain paving stones light up. Barron had no idea what Jackson's choreography was going to be and offered to do a few rehearsals so that Jackson could hit his marks properly. But Jackson declined. With little to no rehearsal, he went in and absolutely nailed the video. After strolling about for the first half, he broke into the brilliant dance moves that he'd become famous for. Barron recalled in his memoir, "I had no idea how he was going to move. It looked like nothing I've ever seen or worked with before. He added this sort of trepidation into the dance, which was about remembering what would light up. As Jackson danced through the shot, he started to produce so much heat that Barron's eyepiece steamed up. Barron remembered, the heat of me watching just made it disappear into a fog. I thought, when people see this, the world is going to change. It was just irresistibly brilliant and totally enthralling to watch." But MTV execs didn't share Barron's enthusiasm for the work. The network declined to show Billie Jean at first, stating that Jackson's music didn't fit in with their rock-centric programming. It was a repeat of Rick James. But unlike James, Jackson was one of the biggest powerhouses in the industry, and his label was willing to go to bat for him. CBS Records president Walter Yetnikov personally called MTV and made his stance on the matter known. In Bruce Sweden's In the Studio with Michael Jackson, he remembers Yetnikov's call. He said to MTV, "I'm pulling everything we have off the air, all our product. I'm not gonna give you any more videos, and I'm gonna go public and fucking tell them about the fact that you don't want to play music by a black guy." Yetnikov's rage scared MTV into submission, and on March 10th, 1983, Billie Jean aired for the first time.
Billie Jean's like my lover. Ooh, she's just a girl who claims that I am the one. But the kid is not my son.
It immediately became one of the most beloved videos on the channel and began to accelerate Thriller's sales. While the world was falling in love with Billie Jean, Jackson was already working on his follow-up video, Beat It. While CBS had funded Billie Jean, they refused to give Jackson money for another video, so he paid for it himself at 3 times the budget of Billie Jean. The original plan was to have Barron direct Beat It as well, but Jackson saw a heartwarming commercial about an urban block party and decided to reach out to that commercial's director, Bob Giraldi. Giraldi pitched a video concept that would feature 2 rival gangs coming together for a fight before being united by dance. The centerpiece of the video, which sees 2 gang members tie their hands together for a knife fight, was taken from an anecdote Giraldi had heard in his own childhood. Jackson was personally invested in the rising issue of inner-city violence and wanted to use his video to help the cause. So to that end, he brought in actual Crips and Bloods as extras for the video. The commitment to narrative as well as the increased budget made Beat It shine. And by the time it was ready, MTV had already seen the power of Billie Jean. They aired a world premiere of Beat It during prime time on March 31st, 1983. These 2 videos cemented Jackson's status as the biggest superstar of this new MTV era, and they translated into commercial success as well. But the most ambitious video from Thriller was still to come. Even after the success of the first 2 videos, Jackson's label was reluctant to do another. They believed the hype cycle around the album had reached its peak and didn't want to front money for another expensive project. But Jackson's manager, Frank DeLeo, thought that the album's title track could make an interesting video. Jackson agreed, and he had a director in mind. Like with Beat It, Jackson had been inspired by watching the work of a director and decided they should collaborate. Only this time it wasn't a commercial. It was the feature film An American Werewolf in London, directed by John Landis. Jackson reached out to Landis, who eventually agreed, but had ambitions for the project. He wanted to do Thriller as a cinema short, harkening back to the days of Bessie Smith and Dudley Murphy. This would be a step away from the hurried, low-budget projects that had defined early MTV and toward the enormous cinematic spectacles that would become the future of the medium. There was just the problem of money. To make the full feature, they had an ambitious budget of $900,000 in mind. But the same executive who had gone to bat for Jackson earlier in the year laughed at this preposterous proposal. In a 2017 interview with The Guardian, John Landis remembered calling Yetkinov to pitch the project. "I had never heard such profanity at such volume. Michael asked, 'What did Walter say?' I told him, Walter said no." But Jackson was undeterred, once again offering to fund the video himself. In the end, he and his team looked elsewhere for funding and found it from the new channel Showtime, which agreed to pony up some of the money and air the project as a short film. With Showtime's backing, MTV decided to step in and fund the rest of the project. In less than a year, MTV had gone from not airing videos from black artists at all to breaking their policy of not paying for videos, all in the name of Michael Jackson. Landis brought his Hollywood pedigree to the film and oversaw a full production that featured a cast and crew, makeup, costumes, extras, everything. The final product was 14 minutes long, with the first half being a short film that culminated in a performance of Thriller and an elaborate dance number. On December 2nd, 1983, the full video for Thriller aired alongside a documentary about its making. It was an enormous success. MTV would air the short film in full regularly, ending each showing with an advertisement for when it would play next. And each time it showed, MTV saw a distinct spike in viewership. The video helped prolong Thriller's album sales, carrying it to an astounding 20 million copies sold by the end of its first year of existence. Landis even screened the full Thriller video to a celebrity audience at a Los Angeles cinema, which meant it would be eligible for the Academy Awards. It failed to receive any nominations, but that didn't mean Jackson wouldn't collect hardware for it. On September 14th, 1984, MTV aired the first ever Video Music Awards, which saw Thriller earn 6 nominations and win 3 awards. In a 2014 interview with the New York Post, Bob Pittman explained the impetus for this new award show. As MTV began to be a success, you then start worrying about what's our franchise. And what we knew was we didn't want other people to be giving out awards for music videos and making it sort of a commodity. We wanted video music to be completely synonymous with MTV, so we knew we needed to do an award show. That first award show displayed many of the artists who were defining the medium of the music video and the culture of the time. Pioneers like David Bowie and Rod Stewart performed, with Bowie winning Best Male Video for China Girl. The Cars won Video of the Year for You Might Think, which is a prime example of the way that this new medium was being used to try out experimental film editing technologies and techniques.
You might think I'm crazy, hang around with you. Maybe I think I'm lucky. That's something.
While many of these give a sort of dated look today, they were cutting edge when the videos came out. The most nominated artists at those first VMAs was Cyndi Lauper, who ended up winning Best Female Video for Girls Just Wanna Have Fun. She was a leader in a new movement of pop music that was quickly becoming intrinsically tied to the video. This pop was light and fun with funk grooves, new wave edge, and a liberated sexuality influenced by disco. It was a music that built visual aesthetics into its culture and thrived on MTV. And perhaps the most important figure in this new movement was the woman who stole the show at the first VMAs, Madonna. Her performance of Like a Virgin shocked the world and started a trend of provocative VMA performances that continues to this day. While Madonna didn't win any awards at that first show and only received 1 nomination, her performance helped launch her into an era that would see her crowned as the Queen of MTV. The next video release after her iconic VMA moment was 1985's Material Girl, directed by Mary Lambert, another staple of the 80s music video circuit. Material Girl pays homage to Golden Age cinema, focusing around a parody of Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. This was a direct response to a press world that frequently compared Madonna to Monroe. The video also serves as a satire on the materialistic culture of Reagan-era America, which had its fingerprints all over MTV, but much of that satire was lost on audiences, who instead saw it as a celebration of that very same materialism. Between Madonna and MJ, 80s pop had its king and queen. All it needed to round things out was Prince. After making a few videos in the early 80s, when MTV was still hesitant to play black artists, Prince's career really began to pop off in the middle of the decade. He used the medium of the video to establish his distinct aesthetic and character, but he wasn't only doing videos on MTV. In 1984, Prince released Purple Rain, a musical feature film like those the Beatles had made a generation earlier. That tradition of musical films continued through the 80s, but now sections of these films would find homes on MTV as music videos. Pink Floyd's The Wall had striking, surreal animations that made for stunning music videos, and new films coming out of Hollywood started to cross over into the music world as the film and music industries grew closer than ever. The video for Kenny Loggins' Footloose, using clips from the movie of the same name, saw heavy circulation on MTV. Even non-musical blockbusters started to create music video tie-ins as promotion, like Danger Zone and Take My Breath Away from Top Gun. In just a few short years, MTV had gone from being a struggling channel airing low-budget videos between constant technical difficulties to a cultural powerhouse transforming two different creative industries. Of course, new channels started to launch in its wake. VH1 debuted across America on January 1st, 1985, and different countries started to produce their own versions of MTV, including Canada's Much Music, which would eventually help to raise a certain video essayist. By now, videos themselves were changing as well, as directors were able to experiment with new techniques and technologies. One of the most important experiments from this era was Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. Mark Knopfler was inspired to write Money for Nothing after overhearing a conversation in a New York kitchen appliance store. At the back of the store, TVs were showing MTV, and one of the shop's blue-collar employees was commenting on what he saw on the screen. Knopfler was enjoying the commentary, so he rushed to find a pen and write some of the thoughts down, transforming them into a song. That song opens on Sting singing ethereal repetition of "I Want My MTV," a phrase taken from an ad campaign in the early days of the channel.
America! Demand your MTV! I want my MTV!
I want my MTV!
I want my MTV! Call your cable company and say, I want my MTV!
When it was released, Money for Nothing became a chart topper, showing the cultural influence that even talking about MTV had at the time. As part of the 70s old guard, Knopfler was actually a bit of a music video hater, but MTV saw obvious potential in the song. So their parent company, Warner, sent Steve Barron to Budapest to talk Knopfler into it. Barron pitched something that would be more conceptual than many of the other videos at the time. Knopfler was still hesitant, but he had a woman with him who helped him change his mind. Barron explained in a 2011 interview with Culture Brats. Luckily, there was someone else that day who he was with, and she said, he's absolutely right. These videos are not creative enough. It was odd because he didn't actually give the go-ahead on that idea. But Knopfler didn't explicitly say no, so Barron went to work with computer animators and put together a rudimentary 3D animation for the project. That was done on an enormous machine called a Bosch FGS 4000, intended for enterprise computer graphics. Barron told Culture Brat, "It was a state-of-the-art, massive machine, which probably does far less than the iPad now. I thought it would be really startling and interesting for a video." And Barron was right. Money for Nothing stands as a seminal piece of 3D computer animation, extending the storied history of dialogue between music videos and animation as a medium. The video is a meta-commentary on music videos themselves, featuring fake videos composited within its odd 3D scene. It was an enormous success, winning Video of the Year at the 1986 VMAs and earning a number of nominations for the band and Barron, including Best Direction in a Video. Barron lost out on that Best Direction nomination to a-ha's Take On Me, a video directed by none other than Steve Barron. Like Money for Nothing, the video for Take On Me blends live-action film with animation, though its reliance on 2D animation means that it perhaps aged a little better. Take On Me reflects a shift in the music video production process, too. Dating back to the days of Top of the Pops, most videos were made on rush production schedules with quick turnarounds. Even Thriller was shot in just 2 days and aired 6 weeks after the shoot. But with Take On Me, Barron had a bit more runway. By the mid-80s, he had established himself as the go-to guy for music videos, so he was able to demand some time to produce a more ambitious concept he'd been dreaming up. He told Culture Brats that his pitch to Warner's Jeff Aroff was, "If you give us 4 months and enough money, we can do something really spectacular." An earlier version of Take On Me had failed to perform, so the label was working on a re-release. Aroff agreed to pull the single from the shelves and push forward the re-release date so that Barron could put the video together. For maybe the first time ever, the production schedule of a music video was dictating the release of a song. Barron's vision for the video was spectacular, with a visual and narrative conceit that still feels fresh to this day. It was so impressive, in fact, that Warner decided to release the video first, letting it air on television and play in dance clubs for a full month before the reissued single came out. And this strategy paid dividends. Take On Me spent 27 weeks atop Billboard's Hot 100 and hit #1 in 11 different countries, launching a rather obscure synth-pop band into superstardom. The success of Barron's experiments with Dire Straits and a-ha helped encourage artists to continue forays into more conceptual videos, and encouraged labels to allocate the resources to make that happen. 1986 saw the debut of one of the most impressive videos ever made, Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. Sledgehammer brought all new levels of ambition to the animated music video, using stop motion to incredible effect, illustrating Gabriel's suggestive lyrics with visuals that are equal parts funny and spectacular. The video was directed by Stephen R. Johnson, who had previously played around with stop motion in the video for Talking Heads' acclaimed Road to Nowhere. Watching that video, it's easy to see the blueprints of Sledgehammer. But while Road to Nowhere features small stop motion segments, nearly all of Sledgehammer is stop motion animated. This was a grueling process that saw Peter Gabriel laying under a sheet of glass for 16 hours straight. In an interview with WMMR Rocks, Gabriel recalled, "It took a lot of hard work. I was thinking at the time, if anybody wants to copy this video, good luck to them." Sledgehammer stands to this day as one of the greatest music videos ever made, and a reminder of a moment where directors were truly starting to understand the potential of this medium. But these high-budget experiments were standouts rather than the norm. The middle decade saw many of the aesthetics that we would come to associate with the 80s emerge through the music video. Robert Palmer's Addicted to Love was a standout for its eerie, detached models and sharp, striking aesthetics. Hair metal videos continued the glam legacy of over-the-top costumes and wild rock antics, combining them with a distinctly male gaze that dominated much of MTV at the time. Videos from all different scenes dabbled in varying degrees of misogyny as MTV flourished, but there were plenty of female artists who were using that exact same male gaze to their advantage, taking control of sexuality with their own appearances in music videos. One way or another, it was clear that music video directors had learned the same lesson that Scopitone directors had learned years ago. Sex sells. By the mid-80s, just about every music scene had their own video language. Rock was continuing its legacy of enormity and excess. Hip-hop was establishing a new visual language, and metal was using the video to promote headbanger culture. By 1987, MTV had become synonymous with the music industry. So much so that the Dead Kennedys even rallied against it with their song MTV Get Off the Air. In MTV Ruled the World, the early years of music video, frontman Jello Biafra explained the reasoning behind this song. The way they were laying it down then was, this is the way music is going to go. From now on, there's no point in even writing a song unless you know what it's going to look like on TV. And that thought occurred to me instantly. Well, even if that's what the major labels think, I think this is bullshit. But no amount of punk rock protest was going to slow the MTV machine now that it was fully operational. There was just too much commercial potential. And so, as ratings soared, labels began to shovel buckets of money into music videos, building elaborate sets and bringing in star directors in hopes of making their video the next huge cultural object. Things were about to get bigger than ever, as MTV would stretch its tendrils into every aspect of American culture, birthing new stars in music and film, becoming the cultural touchstone for a generation of youth, and even helping to get a president elected. On August 31st, 1987, CBS aired a TV special called Michael Jackson, The Magic Returns. After completely transforming MTV with his videos for Thriller, Jackson had gone several years without a new release. In that time, music videos had exploded, with all sorts of artists pushing the medium both technically and financially. But the king of pop hadn't been idle. For 2 years, he'd been holed up working on his follow-up, an album called Bad. That meant more than just making music. It meant following up the incredible videos that had propelled Thriller to its unprecedented sales. So how do you follow up an ambitious, critically acclaimed short film directed by a bona fide Hollywood director? You create an even more ambitious film, and you tap in one of the greatest minds in film history to direct it. To that end, Michael Jackson linked up with none other than Martin Scorsese to create the short film Bad. Like Thriller before it, Bad features a narrative short before breaking into a highly choreographed dance number. This dance was inspired by West Side Story and sees Jackson revisiting the gang violence issue that had been at the center of the Beat It video. It also features a young Wesley Snipes and some of the smoothest dancing of Jackson's career. The whole production was grander than anything pop music had seen before. It had a budget of $2 million and a 6-week production schedule. And from the moment the video aired on that CBS special, it was celebrated as one of the greatest videos of its day. It entered into rotation on MTV and asserted Jackson as the video maker of his era. And he was just getting started. He followed Bad up a year later with Moonwalker, a feature-length film with a number of music video vignettes, including the claymation Speed Demon, the experimental animated Leave Me Alone, and the Fred Astaire-inspired Smooth Criminal. Smooth Criminal's budget dwarfed even that of Bad, being produced for $8 million and taking 2 months to complete. As the 80s drew to a close, the biggest stars of the day were making music videos with scope and budgets that were beginning to rival Hollywood. Bad and Moonwalker might seem like they represent the apex of the ambition of music videos, but as the 90s were about to prove, things were actually just getting started. In 1986, as MTV had fully taken hold of the American psyche, a group of producers and directors teamed up to form Propaganda Films, a production company with a specific focus on the music video. Producer Steve Golan told Index magazine about his inspiration to found Propaganda. Back then, I firmly believed that as MTV grew, music videos would have a huge impact on TV commercials and movies in the not-too-distant future. And that's exactly what happened. Music videos popularized a choppier, slicker, glossier look. Miami Vice was born out of that with its bright colors and its emphasis on fashion and music. When Propaganda founded, they had 4 directors on their roster. Dominic Sena, who had worked with acts like Fleetwood Mac, Sting, and Bryan Adams. Greg Gold, who did videos for Michael Bolton, Chaka Khan, and Stevie Wonder. Nigel Dick, who worked with acts like Toto and Guns N' Roses in the 80s before becoming one of the defining directors of the 90s and early 2000s, doing extensive work with bands like Oasis, Nickelback, and even helping launch Britney Spears' career. The fourth and most famous of the bunch was David Fincher. Fincher spent his 80s working with huge stars like Rick Springfield, Paula Abdul, and Aerosmith, and would eventually launch into a career as an award-winning feature film director. One of Fincher's most fruitful creative partnerships was with the queen of MTV herself, Madonna. In 1989, Fincher directed the stylized, sensual Express Yourself and the noir dreamlike Oh Father. The two had immaculate creative synergy, with Madonna's pop vision matching Fincher's meticulous filmmaking ethos. Their most important collaboration might be 1990's Vogue.
Strike a pose. Strike a pose.
By the end of the 80s, Madonna had scored 16 consecutive top 5 singles, many of which were propelled by music videos. So when Oh Father topped out at number 20, it was a disappointment, and Madonna's label asked her to put together another video. She and Fincher rushed into production on Vogue, filming the visuals in just 16 hours over 2 days. This is a sharp contrast to Fincher's famously scrupulous direction style and to the lavish productions that were happening at the day. It's a lot more like the rushed videos that helped define the medium at the start of the decade. but the final product doesn't feel rushed at all. There's something raw and beautiful about Madonna's performance. It catapulted house music into the mainstream and brought voguing into the spotlight. These were staples of queer clubbing culture, and their massive public exposure helped to normalize that culture at the height of the AIDS crisis when homophobia was running rampant. The video would collect nominations at the 1990 VMAs, and Fincher would bring home Best Direction, beating out some of the greatest videos of the era, including Candice Reckinger's Opposites Attract, which saw Paula Abdul dancing with an animated cat, an experiment following in the lineage set forth by Cab Calloway's collaboration with Fleischer Studios way back in the 30s. 1990 also saw Fincher help George Michael make the most defiant statement of his career with Freedom 90. Throughout the 80s, George Michael had established himself as a sex symbol thanks to a series of music videos that included the famous Faith. But he was fed up with the attention and objectification he felt from leering music video cameras. In protest of this intense gaze, he worked with Fincher to put together Freedom 90, which saw a series of famous supermodels sing George Michael's words as the leather jacket from Faith burned and the jukebox exploded. Fincher's work with George Michael, Madonna, and others helped launch him into a career as one of the most celebrated filmmakers of his day, and he wasn't the only propaganda alumnus to leap to Hollywood. Michael Bay started working with propaganda right out of film school and would direct a number of great videos, including Divinal's I Touch Myself and Meatloaf's I Would Do Anything for Love, But I Won't Do That. Later in the 90s, Spike Jonze and Michelle Gondry would work with propaganda before going on to their own careers in Hollywood. The greatest triumph of propaganda films might be Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814. Not to be outdone by her brother's success with Moonwalker, Janet Jackson conceived of her own ambitious visual project in 1989. Rhythm Nation 1814 was envisioned not as an album with music videos, but rather as a single visual album. Jackson and her choreographers knew the vision and steps for the music videos before she went into the studio, so producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis took that aesthetic into account when producing the music for Rhythm Nation. To create the visuals, she tapped Propaganda's Dominic Sena. In I Want My MTV, she explained, Dominic understood the story and he could put on screen from front to back the whole picture you had in your head. The foggy, smoky street, and the dark black and white tone, that was all intentional. Part of the idea behind the black and white aesthetic was to create unity between people of all different skin tones, underlining the project's message of racial justice. Rhythm Nation debuted on MTV and became one of the key influences on the visual direction of the next decade.
It's time to give a damn, let's work together. Come on now.
Pop wasn't the only music stretching its visual ambitions. By the time the 90s rolled around, rock and roll had been making videos for nearly 3 decades and had a reputation as the home of grandiose self-indulgence. To this effect, Guns N' Roses released their own cinematic experiment in 1992, November Rain. November Rain was an epic, dramatic piece based on the short story Without You by Del James. The video, directed by veteran music video director Andy Morahan, tells a tragic story of love, infidelity, and death, interspersed between footage of GNR playing in a concert hall. November Rain was another high-budget video, coming in at over $1.5 million. The most lasting image from that video is Slash's guitar solo. The band originally wanted Slash to solo in a field, but the whole video was shot during winter, so all the nearby fields were dead. Undeterred, they picked up their chapel set piece and brought it with them to the New Mexico desert. Slash's aesthetic with long hair, a leather jacket, and a dart hanging out of his mouth epitomized the rock and roll aesthetic of the era. But by the time November Rain came out in 1992, that aesthetic was already starting to change. On August 17, 1991, a group of teenage extras piled into a soundstage for the filming of a video by an upstart punk band called Nirvana. Nirvana were filming a video for the lead single of their upcoming album, Nevermind. They had called in Samuel Bayer to shoot the film. In classic albums Nevermind, Bayer theorizes that he may have been hired because his test reel was bad enough that the band thought it would be punk. In a world of overwrought budgets and corporate rock, Nirvana put together Smells Like Teen Spirit for a budget between $30,000 and $50,000, more comparable to the era of Top of the Pop videos than to their MTV contemporaries. Kurt Cobain had a clear vision for this video and even spent time in the editing booth recutting the final product after Bayer was done with it. The video was inspired by Ramones Rock and Roll High School and the 1979 cult film Over the Edge, in which a group of rowdy suburban kids wreak havoc on their neighborhood and school. And the destruction seen in the video is authentic. The extras were forced to sit on cramped and uncomfortable bleachers for over 4 hours shooting the video. Toward the end of the shoot, Kurt Cobain himself convinced Bayer to let the kids mosh, and chaos ensued. The sheer catharsis of the extras tearing apart the set captured the angst and youthful rage that Nirvana hoped to embody. Smells Like Teen Spirit struck a chord in a generation of restless youth and kickstarted a new era of MTV. The channel realized the potential that this new market of kids had, and they weren't the only ones. Politicians saw a new voting bloc in the emerging Generation X and realized that MTV could be a way to galvanize youth voters. During the 1992 presidential election, Bill Clinton appeared on MTV in between music videos to try to speak directly to the youth. After he was elected, he would continue to appear on the channel, including hosting a town hall-style discussion in 1994. A new generation of teens and young adults were starting to assert their cultural identity, and MTV was a central part of that identity. And the musicians they loved were breaking from the tradition of 80s rock videos and creating their own vision for what the art form could be. The same year Nirvana released Smells Like Teen Spirit, REM released Losing My Religion, a video that features surreal vignettes underlining the emotions of the song.
That's me in the corner. That's me in the spotlight, losing my religion.
The vision for that video came from director Tarsem Singh, who talked frontman Michael Stipe out of doing a straightforward performance video, instead convincing him to pull from a more abstract place of heightened emotions. Stipe told Rolling Stone, Tarsem had this idea, which was to film it in the style of a particular kind of Indian movie, in which everything is melodramatic and wry, dreamlike. It's worth noting here that India has a rich tradition of music on film that continues to this day, but honestly, there's so much there that it would need a whole series on its own if I was going to get into it. Losing My Religion earned enormous critical acclaim, racking up 9 nominations and winning 6 awards at the 1991 VMAs. Its esoteric style bled into many of the videos from the alternative rock era. You can even see it later in Nirvana videos like Heart-Shaped Box. A generation who grew up watching the experiments from the 80s were starting to understand that the power in the music video stretched far beyond simply seeing artists perform. The medium of the video allowed for depictions of the emotionality behind songs rather than the simple literalization of their lyrics. This era gave us all sorts of iconic video shots, like the B-Girl in Blind Melon's No Rain, another seminal alt-rock piece by Samuel Bayer, or Pearl Jam's Jeremy, which takes a true story and heightens the emotions with dramatic staging and lighting. But on the flip side, this alternative rock movement was also using the music video for whimsy and humor. Spike Jonze directed the Beastie Boys' Sabotage, which saw them sending up cheesy 70s films. Cake's The Distance uses bright colors and goofy costumes, and Primus had a whole host of strange, surreal videos. One of the oddest videos from this movement is Black Hole Sun, which combines over-the-top comedy with a dark edge of eldritch horror.
Black hole sun, won't you come wash away the rain? Black hole sun, won't you come, won't you come?
The darkness that Soundgarden depicts in their video was all over grunge and the adjacent movement of industrial music. Greens and browns started to dominate screens as artists celebrated grime, filth, and brokenness. Floria Sigismondi made a name for herself working with these aesthetics, creating strange and terrifying videos like Our Lady Peace's Birdman or Marilyn Manson's The Beautiful People. The grimiest, darkest video from this movement came in 1994, with 9 Inch Nails' Closer, directed by Mark Romanek, and produced by Propaganda Films. Closer is a masterclass in the horror and discomfort of abjection. Romanek sets up scenes of disgust and viscera, combining them with a dark eroticism to mimic the self-hatred and strange sexuality of 9 Inch Nails' lyrics. The video was so shocking that its director's cut couldn't air on MTV, but a highly censored video did make it into circulation. The shoot for Closer was just as torturous as its visuals might make one believe. In a making-of documentary, Romanek explained, "I pretty much tortured Trent for 3 or 4 days on this video. I spun him so long that I believe he vomited. He was pretty much treated like a piñata on this video, but he never complained once. I think he knew we were making something interesting." Most of the sets smelled atrocious due to the actual pig head and enormous rotting sides of beef used in the filming. The entire crew was overwhelmed by the smell, Romanek said. "We ended up dripping Old Spice cologne onto filter masks and bandanas due to the horrific stench." To combine with these images of rot and decay, Romanek used out-of-date film stock. These kinds of grungy visual effects and color palettes might feel pretty par for the course today, but Closer is actually one of the seminal works in developing the kind of grunge aesthetic that still makes it into modern music videos and many video essays. It's this ethos of experimentation and creative vision that made Romanek one of the most celebrated directors of the era. He was behind the camera for such videos as Jay-Z's 99 Problems, the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Can't Stop, and Johnny Cash's Hurt. But his most ambitious project came in 1995, when he worked with Janet and Michael Jackson on Scream. Guinness World Records famously declared that the $7 million budget for Scream made it the most expensive music video of all time, but Romanek refutes that claim, noting that there were many other high-budget productions at the time. Either way, Scream did take a considerable amount of money, and it used that money to create a futuristic, gravity-defying video. The budget went into elaborate sets, cutting-edge computer animation, and a team of 4 choreographers for the 2 dancers in the video. With the influence that both Jacksons had on the medium of the music video, Scream naturally became a landmark collaboration. And it was also a clear example of an aesthetic style that was about to take over pop music. As the world pushed toward the new millennium, more people got online, and new technologies seemed to be promising a sci-fi future. This era saw the birth of Daft Punk, who used their music videos to build a mythology around their robot personas. And a new generation of pop stars who defined the era embraced this futuristic vibe. NSYNC turned to Y2K futurism for I Want You Back and Bye Bye Bye. The biggest new star of this era was Britney Spears, whose extraordinary choreography and undeniable charm launched her into stardom with Baby One More Time in 1999. A year later, for the lead single of her sophomore album, she would celebrate the new millennium with her own futuristic video, Oops, I Did It Again.
I think I did it again.
Of course, not every perspective on this future was optimistic. In 1996, Jamiroquai's Virtual Insanity saw lead singer JK dancing in a futuristic insane asylum as he questions the world that is about to come. The original vision for that video was to have JK dancing on a floor that was moving beneath him, a clear visual metaphor for the uncertainty that he sings about in the song. But when they went in to make the video, they realized it was actually too expensive to make a moving floor. Instead, they created the illusion by moving the walls around Kay. They heightened this surreality by sporadically fastening certain pieces of furniture into the wall from behind with bolts, so they would move with the room while other furniture stayed still. The result is one of the most mind-bending videos ever made, and it's all tied together by a perfect performance by Kay. This performance was choreographed, but there were a number of hair-raising moments and close calls where Kay nearly hit a wall or almost got conked out by a piece of moving furniture. One of the masters of the Y2K vibe was Hype Williams, who stands to this day as maybe the most important video director in hip-hop history. His work on Missy Elliott's 1997 hit, The Rain, Supa Dupa Fly, showed a unique vision for the future by dressing Missy up in a giant blow-up leather suit.
I break up with him before he dump. To have me, yes, he lucky.
It's my window. I can't stand her.
In a 2023 tweet, Missy Elliott remembered filming this video, saying that she needed to go to the gas station for air to blow up the suit, and then couldn't fit into the car ride home. As a result, she had to walk through Brooklyn in a giant inflatable suit. Whatever odd humiliation Missy went through, it was worth it as the video became a seminal piece of Afrofuturism and cemented Hype Williams as one of the most important video makers for the new era to come. The Rain was a landmark moment for Williams, but it was far from his breakthrough. He and cinematographer John Perez had spent much of the 90s developing the visual language of hip-hop. While there were early rap videos in the 80s, they had a limited platform, so few of them broke through. It wasn't until 1988 that MTV introduced Yo MTV Raps, their hip-hop specific show. With a popular platform for their videos and the genre entering its second generation, rap music started to flourish at the end of the decade. Specifically, gangster rap spread through MTV, leaving controversy in its wake. NWA's videos for Straight Outta Compton and Fuck the Police displayed West Coast style and shifted hip-hop away from its playful party vibes towards something with more menace and edge. Not long after that, Hype Williams hit the scene. His early collaborations were with underground acts who didn't break the mainstream, but by 1994, he found himself working with artists like Wu-Tang Clan and the Notorious B.I.G.
To all the ladies in the place with style and grace, allow me to lace these lyrical douches in your bushes. Who rock grooves and make moves with all the mommies. The back of the club, sipping Moet is where you find me.
Williams and Perez loved using fisheye lenses to exaggerate the features of their subjects. They edited with rapid cuts that emulated the speed of rap music, and they created elaborate set pieces for their artists to perform on. Most of the biggest names in 90s rap collaborated with Williams at some point. His videography includes appearances from A Tribe Called Quest, Jay-Z, LL Cool J, Nas, and remarkably, both the Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac Shakur. Williams' only collaboration with Tupac, California Love, was based on Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome and brings a post-apocalyptic aesthetic into the world of gangster rap.
Out on bail, fresh out of jail, California dreaming. Soon as I step on the scene, I'm hearing hoochie screaming, fiending for money and alcohol. The life of a West Side player with cowards die and a strong ball. Only in Cali will we riot, not rally to live and die. In LA we wear chucks, not valleys.
Of course, Hype Williams wasn't the only director working in hip-hop. F. Gary Gray made a career for himself working with Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, before later putting together Outkast's Miss Jackson and TLC's Waterfalls, the first hip-hop video ever to win Best Video at the VMAs.
Don't go chasing waterfalls. Please stick to the rivers and the lakes that you're used to. I know that you're gonna have it your way or nothing at all, but I think you're moving too fast.
Paul Hunter worked with Snoop Dogg, Warren G, and Mariah Carey before teaming up with the Notorious B.I.G. for one of the most elaborate rap videos of the era, 1997's Hypnotize. That video leans fully into gangster aesthetics, but amps them up to another level. Rather than the street-level gangster vibe that NWA pioneered, Biggie is portrayed as a high-level, Scarface-style gangster living a life of extreme excess while being pursued by federal authorities. Throughout the 90s, rap music was on the rise and brushing up against the mainstream, but it wouldn't fully break through and capture white America until a white rapper appeared on the scene. On January 21st, 1999, the video for Eminem's My Name Is debuted on MTV's Total Request Live.
Hi, my name is what? My name is my name is it's named Sadie. Hi, my name is my name is what?
attention of the class for 1 second.
Eminem had recently signed with Dr. Dre, who saw his potential in the mainstream and decided to put him in front of a camera. Dre and director Philip Atwell had a specific vision for the video, which would see Eminem spoofing many of the biggest figures of the moment, including Marilyn Manson and Bill Clinton. Despite the fact that he'd never shot a high-budget video before, Eminem's natural comedy and charisma came through in that video. It introduced the world to the strange, surreal violence of his Slim Shady character and spawned 1,000 shady imitators in suburban homes across America. A year later, Eminem would take on these imitators in The Real Slim Shady, another collaboration with Atwell. That video, another wacky comedy piece, would become the first outright rap video to win Best Video at the VMAs, cementing Eminem's status as one of the preeminent artists of the era. But Eminem would prove just as capable of darker videos as well. Stan is a literal depiction of its song's haunting lyrics, showing an obsessive fan's descent into madness and the eventual murder of his girlfriend. This video was heavily censored on MTV, with its more violent scenes missing entirely, and many of the lyrics censored as well.
Dear Stan, I meant to write you sooner, but I just been busy. You said your girlfriend's pregnant now. How far along is she? Look, I'm really flattered you would call your daughter that. And here's an autograph for your brother. I wrote it on the starter cap.
By the time the new millennium hit, the music video was in a stronger place than it had ever been. There were so many visionary directors pushing the medium in so many directions that it's been impossible to hit on all of them throughout this video. So here are a few key ones that we haven't mentioned yet. Sophie Muller had a prolific career dating all the way back to the 80s. She directed a ton of videos with Eurythmics before going on to work with No Doubt, Blur, and Weezer. She pioneered the band in a dim room style that still makes its way into videos today, and she continues to work with some of the biggest acts on earth. Stephanie Sednawi made some of the best alternative rock videos of the 90s, working with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, U2, Alanis Morissette, and the Smashing Pumpkins. Wayne Isham got a start in metal, including the video for Metallica's Enter Sandman, but by the late 90s, he had expanded his repertoire and created the look behind some of the most famous boy band videos, including the Backstreet Boys' I Want It That Way and NSYNC's Bye Bye Bye. Michel Gondry established himself as one of the most original directors of the era, creating inventive works with Daft Punk, Björk, and the Chemical Brothers before jumping into a collaboration with the White Stripes that would define a lot of early viral videos. And there's so many more. But instead of diving into all of those, I want to bring this video home with one of the strangest and most iconic videos of the new millennium, Fatboy Slim's Weapon of Choice. Weapon of Choice was directed by Spike Jonze, who got his start making skateboard videos and then became one of the most in-demand directors of 90s alt-rock. He worked with R.E.M., Sonic Youth, and Beastie Boys, and gained the admiration of Academy Award-winning actor Christopher Walken. In an interview with High Frequency, Fatboy Slim explained how the unlikely collaboration between himself, Jones, and Walken came about. Walken said to Spike, "I would love to get my dancing on film while I'm still young enough to do it." So Spike went outside and phoned me and said, "Mr. Walken tap dancing in the video," and I was like, yes. I think it's full of irony to see an actor that I really admire, but who's famous for playing psychopaths. To see that silly, unpsychopathic dancing made me smile and made everyone else smile. For his part, Walken told The Hollywood Interview that it was actually quite easy to dance to Fatboy Slim's music. It's good for tap because it has a deliberate, almost a drum-like beat. Weapon of Choice was not just a surprising and strange video, it was a sign of things to come. As the digital era was dawning and audiences were gaining more access than ever to music videos, it became more important to stand out in a crowded scene. Once, standing out had meant enormous budgets, but people were about to prove that a clever idea, a memorable conceit, or a smooth piece of camera trickery could go just as far. And that's because the way people watched videos was about to undergo a transformation nearly as dramatic as the introduction of MTV in the first place. On February 1st, 2004, millions across America tuned in to watch two of MTV's biggest stars perform at a Super Bowl halftime show produced by MTV itself. Janet Jackson had wowed the music video world with her 1989 visual album Rhythm Nation 1814 and gone on to dominate MTV throughout the 90s with a series of high-budget videos that highlighted her unique dance style and undeniable sex appeal. On the other side of things was Justin Timberlake, the newly crowned Prince of Pop. Timberlake was all over MTV during the late 90s boy band craze as a member of NSYNC. In 2002, he launched into a solo career with the celebrated album Justified. The second single from that album was Cry Me a River, a song about Timberlake's public breakup with Britney Spears. That video depicted Timberlake breaking into the house of a Spears lookalike and filming himself having sex. It was a step away from Timberlake's clean-cut boy band reputation and toward a darker, more sexual edge. Timberlake had been a fan of Jackson's growing up, attending the Rhythm Nation tour as a child and later opening for Jackson as a member of NSYNC during her Velvet Rope World Tour. In that way, his collaboration with her at the Super Bowl was poised to be a celebration of sorts, a passing of the torch from one member of pop royalty to another. And the performance did prove to be one of the most important moments in pop music history, but not for the reasons that Jackson or Timberlake might have expected. Toward the end of Timberlake's performance of Rock Your Body, right after singing the line, "Gonna have you naked by the end of this song," Timberlake pulled away a piece of Janet Jackson's top. The plan was for the garment to come off and reveal a red lace bra, but a wardrobe malfunction meant that the bra tore away as well, leaving Jackson's breast exposed for a fraction of a second. The fallout from this was enormous. A media firestorm rose up around the incident. Jackson responded by pointing out that there were much more important issues going on in the world and that this was not the big story everyone was making it out to be. The music industry felt that this response was insufficient and decided to blacklist Jackson for having the audacity to exist as a woman with a breast. This incident created ripples that changed the entire music industry in the years to come. There was one particular piece of fallout from the event that would transform the music video industry specifically, but it went almost entirely unnoticed at the time. A computer engineer named Jawed Karim had missed the halftime show, but wanted to see what the fuss was all about. He turned to the internet to try to find video of the incident, and couldn't find it anywhere. Karim realized that there was a real gap in the online video world, so he reached out to his friends Steve Chen and Chad Hurley to work on a project to fill that. That project took the better part of a year for them to put together, but on February 14th, 2005, they went live with a site that would let people upload their own video content. That site was called YouTube. It would take a little while for YouTube to catch on in the mainstream, but once it did, the music industry and music videos would never be the same again. YouTube might have been the most drastic change to come out of digital technology, but computers were already transforming music videos by the late 90s. One of the biggest shifts came in animation. Computer-generated animation had progressed in leaps and bounds from the clunky days of Dire Straits' Money for Nothing. Animators could now create vivid, if a bit uncanny worlds to represent music visually. Directors Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Faris turned the Red Hot Chili Peppers into video game characters for Californication. Eiffel 65 told a wild sci-fi story complete with blue CGI aliens for their Blue Dabba Dee. Radiohead's Pyramid song matched eerie atmospheric music to surreal underwater scenery created with CGI, and some people sought to push things even further. In 2003, Eric Wernquist created a short 3D animated video set to a viral sound created by a teenage student named Daniel Malmedal. Wernquist posted that animation, which he dubbed The Annoying Thing, on a forum called CG Talk and on his own website, and it quickly spread across the internet. A ringtone company saw the potential in the character, bought it off Wernquist, and created a music video for The Annoying Thing, calling it Crazy Frog. That video went even more viral, and soon the company that made it was trying to milk the character for all it was worth. Crazy Frog soon inspired imitators like Gummy Bear and Holly Dolly. These were all new takes on an old idea, the virtual musician. Some of the earliest versions of this existed all the way back in the 60s with groups like the Monkees or the Archies, and the Buggles predicted the concept in their landmark Video Killed the Radio Star. But digital technology allowed people to push this idea further than ever. The greatest example of the virtual band concept was born in 1998, when musician Damon Albarn and visual artist Jamie Hewlett collaborated to create Gorillaz. The duo came up with the idea for Gorillaz while living together as flatmates. Hewlett remembered in an interview with Wired, "One day we were home watching MTV with our eyes just kind of glazed. Because if you watch MTV too long, it's a bit like hell. There's nothing of substance there. So we got this idea for a cartoon band, something that would be a comment on that. They built this idea out and developed a cast of archetypal characters that would satirize the music industry as they saw it. These characters made their music video debut in Tomorrow Comes Today, whose title stands as a bold proclamation of the era they were bringing on. That video featured relatively low production value, composing simple animations onto stock footage backgrounds, but it was enough to prove that the concept had legs. A year later, Gorillaz would follow up with their breakthrough hit, Clint Eastwood. The video for Clint Eastwood was a clear step up from Tomorrow Comes Today. It had a 4-month production period, and it used that time to create one of the most memorable videos of its era. That video is a blueprint for what Gorillaz videos would become, expanding the mythos of the characters and looping in a feature with Del the Funky Homo Sapien playing Del the Ghost Rapper, a ghost that possesses the drummer Russell.
Finally, someone let me out of my cage. Now, time for me is nothing cause I'm counting no A's. Nah, I couldn't be there. Nah, you shouldn't be scared. I'm good at repairs and I'm under each snare.
They would follow this up in short succession with 19-2000, and before long, these virtual stars found themselves as genuine hitmakers. In 2005, they released their incendiary sophomore album, Demon Days, an instant classic that captured the spirit of the era both visually and conceptually. The success of Gorillaz is directly tied to their inventive use of the music video as medium, and to an inherent understanding of a new, emerging generation of kids. In 2001, Virgin Records co-president Ray Cooper told the Chicago Tribune about what he saw in this new generation, who had grown up in a time where MTV was no longer novel. He noted that they watched Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon as much as MTV, adding that animation was allowing people to experiment in ways that the live-action music video hadn't. I think there's a growing sense within that community that it can be very hard to truly make an original live-action video. In 2003, Daft Punk would make a significant addition to the animated music video canon with Interstellar 5555. An anime feature film that served as a companion piece for their 2001 album Discovery. That film was inspired by the work of legendary manga writer Leiji Matsumoto, and Matsumoto actually helped supervise its creation. It saw Daft Punk weave an intergalactic sci-fi storyline through videos for hit songs like One More Time and Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. A few years before Daft Punk collaborated with Matsumoto, another high-profile comic artist had collaborated with musicians. 1998 saw the new metal band Korn team up with Spawn creator Todd McFarlane to create Freak on a Leash.
Sometimes I cannot take this place. Sometimes it's my life I can't taste. Sometimes I cannot feel my face. You'll never see me fall from grace.
Freak on a Leash was an enormous success, hitting number 1 on MTV's Total Request Live and spending 10 non-consecutive days there while it fought off Britney Spears' Baby One More Time and NSYNC's A Little More Time on You. Korn videos were so popular that Total Request Live actually had to retire them because too many people were calling in requests. Nu metal was a rising force in the new millennium, and one that came with a distinct visual aesthetic. Ever since the birth of the music video, metal in its many iterations had thrived on the visual language of the medium. Nu metal in particular built on the dark imagery from the 90s industrial movement, punctuating its grimy visuals with distinctive political messages. Many in the movement embraced the horror aesthetics at the time. Static X used creepy claymation paired with deep greens and blues for their Push It. Deftones created an eerie tale with drab palettes and ominous scenes of a Halloween party in Change in the House of Flies. Slipknot built entire personalities around twisted masks that called to mind slasher antagonists. Nu metal peaked in mainstream popularity in 2003 when Linkin Park released their sophomore album Meteora. Linkin Park spoke for a generation struggling with the onset of this strange new era. They used sharp videos to underline the messages of their songs. Numb tells a story of teenage alienation and mental health, with its teenage protagonist using art as an outlet in a parallel to Chester Bennington's own struggles with mental illness. The band won Best Rock Video at the 2003 VMAs for the striking set design and surreal imagery of Somewhere I Belong. The most ambitious video for Meteora was the last one released, Breaking the Habit. That video was a collaboration with Japanese animator Kazuto Nakazawa. It told a tense human story on the backdrop of a dark, dystopian city. This vision was one of the most distinctive of the era, and no doubt influenced a rising culture of AMVs, fan-made music videos created by editing other pieces of media together. As they were riding the wave of Meteora, Linkin Park produced one of the most successful crossover projects in music history by collaborating with Jay-Z, one of the biggest names in hip-hop by the early 2000s. Jay-Z had been a staple in hip-hop since the 90s, but in the 2000s, he was proving to have a longevity that few of his hip-hop peers could compare to. And indeed, it was in 2003 that he released maybe the most iconic video of his career, 99 Problems. Jay-Z originally wanted Quentin Tarantino to direct the video, but producer Rick Rubin talked him into working with Mark Romanek. By this point, Romanek had been working in music videos for over a decade, and had made some of the most celebrated videos of all time. Jay-Z was supposedly going to retire after the Black Album, with the video being a swan song for his career. To lean into that, Romanek made a video that embraced Jay-Z's history, shooting the projects he grew up in with unmatched style and flair. The video, like the song itself, uses this imagery to comment on systemic racism in the US, and ends with the murder of Jay-Z. This violent end went against MTV's oblique censorship rules, but the station made an exception for Jay-Z. Whenever the video showed, it was preceded by a clip of MTV special correspondent John Norris explaining that the murder was purely symbolic.
MTV has for more than a decade now discouraged videos containing any kind of gun imagery or gratuitous violence. On very rare occasions, however, when compelled by the artistic merits of a particular clip, MTV has offered at least some form of limited airplay to just a handful of controversial videos. Well, now Jay-Z can be added to the list of artists pushing the channel's envelope. Fresh from the edit suite comes 99 Problems. The video, said to be Jay's last, culminates with a scene in which the MC is violently gunned down on the streets of his beloved Brooklyn. Jay insists that the dramatic conclusion to his music video career is not gratuitous, but rather, as he recently told our very own Sway, rife with symbolism, showing the death of Jay-Z and the rebirth of Sean Carter. Right now, you can check it out for yourself. Here is 99 Problems from Jay-Z.
If you having girl problems, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. I got the rap patrol on the cat patrol. Foes that want to make sure my
99 Problems was a standout video that sat apart from many of its rap contemporaries. By the early 2000s, hip-hop had entered one of the most controversial periods in its history, the bling era. The bling era saw rap fully embrace indulgence and opulence. Rap videos became dominated by expensive cars, ostentatious jewelry, and any other display of wealth and success that directors could think of. Bling was a victory lap for hip-hop, which had risen from the underground and defied systemic racism to take over the music industry. But bling was also a movement full of predatory producers and heavy misogyny. These realities drew plenty of criticism at the time, but at the end of the day, what really killed the era was that people were starting to get bored. Some artists, like Outkast and Missy Elliott, continued to push boundaries, but by and large, hip-hop videos in the early 2000s were starting to feel bland and predictable. And a similar problem was happening in pop. There were, of course, standouts. Britney Spears released a dozen or so iconic videos through the late 90s and early 2000s, but there might be none as perfectly assembled as 2003's Toxic. While many pop artists had limited say over their videos, Spears developed the entire idea for Toxic on her own before bringing it to director Joseph Kahn. Kahn was one of the most prolific music video directors of all time, rising up in the late 90s by collaborating with everyone from Rob Zombie to Backstreet Boys to Faith Hill. His first collaboration with Britney came in 2000's Stronger. That video, like so much of Spears' catalog, was built on the back of her distinctive choreography and undeniable style. Toxic dialed both of these up another notch. Spears had an idea for a video that would feature her as a secret agent out for revenge. This agent disguises herself as a sultry stewardess before jumping into an action set piece, dodging lasers and running away from explosions. She worked closely with choreographer Brian Friedman to ensure that each cut and each scene flowed seamlessly together through dance. Khan told MTV, "Directors and choreographers typically have to work together, but this video was strictly structured by the way in which she dances in each scene. It's usually more random than that. This planning means that the cut from Britney on the plane to nude Britney covered in diamonds doesn't feel jarring at all." That diamond shot, the most scandalous of the video, actually featured Spears nude with no bodysuit. Spears made everybody on the set leave for that section of the shoot, so it was just her and Khan alone with the camera. Khan later joked about the moment with MTV, calling the job one of the best in the world. The entire video showed that Spears was not just a brilliant performer, but someone who understood the way that she was perceived by the public and the media, and someone who could use that to assert her place within the broader cultural canon. The video is clearly inspired by Marilyn Monroe and Madonna, but also features influence from John Woo movies, James Bond, and Blade Runner, and it manages to balance it all out with a cheeky sort of comedy. Khan told MTV about what made Britney such a singular artist. She totally understands that she's naughty and nice, that she's the girl next door gone bad who is constantly titillating you. Spears would further assert herself through sexuality as her career continued. Another one of her standouts came in 2008 when she adopted the visual of a circus master, commanding the gaze of the cameras and audience alike. Few other artists could keep up with Britney Spears' talent and vision through the 2000s, and many of her musical contemporaries didn't even appreciate the artistry. She became a symbol for the kind of industry pop that people were getting tired of. As evidenced by the Spears face-off against Korn's Freak on a Leash, a new population of predominantly young men was looking for something different and rougher around the edges. For some, that came in the heavy darkness of nu metal, but for others, it came in the juvenile irreverence of pop punk. In 1999, Blink-182 released All the Small Things, a video parodizing Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera. Like Freak on a Leash, All the Small Things was so popular on Total Request Live that it had to be retired. In a 2000 interview with MTV, director Marcus Siega spoke on the impact of this video. In some ways, I think that the video put Blink at that sort of pop level with those other bands, but it kind of became what it was making fun of. Pop punks got famous by presenting themselves as an alternative to the celebrity culture of the 2000s. This might be most direct in Good Charlotte's Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous, a video that took on the topic by colliding the DIY collage aesthetics of punk with imagery taken from the era of celebrity scandal. When they weren't thumbing their nose at celebrities, pop punks were running around naked or partying in skate parks in their videos. But this kind of schoolboy humor faded away as the weight of the political moment began to take hold. America fell deeper into the war on terror, and a new kind of hysteria gripped the world. So the pop punks began to embrace a darker sound and darker videos. Blink-182's I Miss You saw the band experiment with a moody, gothic aesthetic. Sum 41's Pieces has Derek Whibley walking down an empty city as fake images of a hollow, perfect society drive past him. But the sharpest shift in pop punk came when Green Day released a series of videos for their seminal protest album, American Idiot. To create the visuals for this album, Green Day teamed up with Samuel Bayer, the man who had transformed MTV with Smells Like Teen Spirit more than a decade earlier. Bayer and Green Day had a cohesive vision that they maintained through 5 videos. Each of them used moody color palettes of beiges, greens, and grays, with sets full of decay and destruction that represented their vision of the state of America during the War on Terror.
I'm walking down the line that divides me somewhere in my mind, on the borderline of the edge and where I walk along.
These images were juxtaposed with symbols of empty hedonism and consumerism. Billy Joe Armstrong told Rolling Stone about his creative inspiration for these images. "We were in the studio watching the journalists embedded with the troops, and it was the worst version of reality television. Switch the channel and it's Nick and Jessica. Switch and it's Fear Factor. Switch and people are having surgery to look like Brad Pitt. We were surrounded by all that bullshit, and the characters Jesus of Suburbia and St. Jimmy are as well. It's a sign of the times." The result of this strange, paradoxical existence is an alienation seen in the videos for Jesus of Suburbia or Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Bayer didn't turn to filters or digital effects to create the destroyed film on Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Instead, he manually destroyed the film negative, a process he'd first experimented with on Garbage's Stupid Girl. The most overtly political imagery from the American Idiot videos come in The Bridge of Holiday, where a ragged burlesque troupe dances in front of visions of bombs falling on cities, or in American Idiot, where the band performs in front of a grungy flag as green slime pours out of speakers. Samuel Bayer followed up American Idiot 2 years later by teaming up with My Chemical Romance for Welcome to the Black Parade and Famous Last Words. Like American Idiot, Welcome to the Black Parade was a statement on the morbid reality of 2000s America. My Chemical Romance leaned into German expressionism to bring out the heightened emotion of the moment, depicting themselves as punk rock psychopomps guiding a character into a ruined underworld. Bayer and MCR were heavily influenced by Tim Burton on these videos, and even worked with Colleen Atwood, an Academy Award-winning costume designer who had collaborated with Burton in the past. This sharp aesthetic helped MCR create an instant classic, and Welcome to the Black Parade became one of the greatest touchstones for a generation of millennial teens. But that generation was becoming less and less attached to MTV. In the late 90s, MTV started to shift its programming away from music videos, filling more and more time with reality TV and original programming. People in the music industry took note of this change and started to complain. At the 2007 VMAs, Justin Timberlake even got on stage and asked MTV to play more videos.
And like I said, play more damn videos. We don't want to see The Simpsons on reality television. Play more videos.
But it was a futile request. By 2008, MTV was only dedicating 3 hours a day to playing videos, a far cry from the 24/7 music video channel that it had once been. And while Timberlake's pleas did little to sway MTV, his actions at the Super Bowl years earlier were starting to have some fallout. Musicians had dabbled with online video before YouTube's unlikely birth. There were a number of other sites that experimented with streaming video, and some even played around with live streaming. Korn had a weekly live stream session on Real Player as they worked on Follow the Leader, but nobody had quite figured out the power of online video just yet. And then, slowly but surely, viral videos began to emerge. Flash animations like Badger 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 and the Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny spread on websites like Newgrounds alongside fan-made videos like the infamous Numa Numa guy. And as this new language was being developed in the early 2000s, some directors were creating videos that would resonate with the online crowd. The most celebrated of these was probably Michel Gondry, a visionary director who had an eye for the sort of eclectic ideas that would soon go viral all the time. He created celebrated videos with Kylie Minogue and the Chemical Brothers, but his most fruitful collaboration was with the White Stripes. Gondry's playful direction style gelled perfectly with the White Stripes' joyous innocence and experimental rock, and together, they made some of the sharpest videos of the era. The Hardest Button to Button and Denial Twist used clever editing and camera trickery to make images that stuck in the mind.
You recognize the effect in the back of the building when she rocks the boat. But it's the cars hitting on the cardinal laws, but the proper place to hang her cold. So do you, the truth is still hidden, and the soul plays the role of a lost little kid.
This celebrated collaboration between Michel Gondry and the White Stripes actually came about by accident. When the White Stripes were creating a video for their hit Fell in Love with a Girl, Jack White asked to work with the director of Beck's Devil's Haircut and was put in touch with Gondry. Except Gondry actually didn't direct Devil's Haircut. Devil's Haircut was directed by Mark Romanek. It was actually Beck's Dead Weight that Gondry had directed. But this mix-up proved serendipitous. Gondry and the White Stripes came up with the idea of making a music video entirely out of Lego. They originally wanted to strike a deal with Lego for the making of the video, but execs at Lego refused, arguing that they didn't market for people over 12. So That's changed. Gondry and the band bought bins full of Lego and used them to build sets for their stop-motion animation. And while much of the video is actually stop motion, big portions of it were done digitally as well, with Gondry turning video footage into pixels first and then modifying them to look like Lego bricks. These two techniques blend seamlessly in the final cut of the video. The entire process for the 2-minute video took 2 months, but the final result had a distinctly approachable DIY feel that made it a hit on the early internet. That DIY ethos was about to take over music videos. In 2006, the group OK Go released a video of themselves dancing in their backyard to their song A Million Ways. This wasn't intended as a music video, but rather as a funny bit to send between friends. In fact, their label EMI didn't even want the dance to see the light of day. According to The Guardian, the words gay and career suicide were used as the label tried to convince the band to kill it. But OK Go liked their little dance, so they slipped the footage to a fan who uploaded it onto YouTube. There, it became an unexpected viral hit and launched YouTube's first dance challenge. OK Go decided to follow this up with a proper video, albeit one made on a shoestring budget. Here It Goes Again had almost no production flair, being visibly shot on a cheap camera with a single static shot. But none of that mattered, because it had a brilliant novel choreography and an undeniable charm. The clever conceit of this treadmill dance calls back to some of the earliest days of proto-music videos, and it was exactly as difficult to shoot as you might expect. The band shot 21 different takes, and only nailed the choreography in 3 of them. Here It Goes Again debuted on YouTube on July 31st, 2006, and it immediately went viral. It was so successful that it hit VH1's Top 20 countdown, and later in the year, the band were invited to perform the routine at the 2006 VMAs. Here It Goes Again was a harbinger for a new era in the music video, and it introduced OK Go to millions of new fans. The band would ride the wave of this success and become known first and foremost for their elaborate and creative video ideas, like 2010's This Too Shall Pass, a video built around an entire Rube Goldberg machine. It took 60 engineers 5 months to set up the elaborate machine, and the actual filming took 85 takes over 2 days. In the wake of OK Go, a whole host of independent musicians flocked to YouTube, hoping to use it as a platform for their own hits. One of the most successful of these was Sick Puppies All the Same, which brought the free hugs movement to a global audience and helped to inspire a trend of fluffy, heartwarming videos. Meanwhile, fan-made videos were on the rise, from lip dubs, AMVs, and dance videos to more unique experiments. June 2007 saw the upload of Daft Hands, a brilliantly creative video for Daft Punk's Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. While this video was not made by the band itself and doesn't conform to a formal definition of the music video, there are many people to this day who associate the song more with Daft Hands than with the official video. Ever since MTV, the bounds of the music video medium had been pretty solid and clear, but the digital world was once again beginning to throw this reality into question. Viral comedy songs, flash videos, and infinite animation loops were coming out of the woodwork. Meanwhile, fan edits were providing alternative options for music videos, or creating visual representations of songs that didn't have videos. Some of these still have more views than official videos to this day. YouTube gave dozens of unlikely creators 15 seconds of viral fame and launched a new subculture. In 2008, mainstream music embraced this budding culture as Weezer released Pork and Beans. That video was the brainchild of director Matthew Cullen. He came up with the idea when directing an advertisement using stuntman Mark Hicks's viral Afro Ninja clip. Because they couldn't secure rights of the original clip for the commercial, Cullen had to bring Hicks back in and reshoot his infamous moment of failure. That process gave him an idea for a music video, and when he heard Weezer's Outkast anthem Pork and Beans, he thought it would be a perfect match. He recalled in a 2008 interview with MTV Buzzworthy, "I loved its nonconformist message, and felt like it's a national anthem for the self-expression that's been taking shape on YouTube and the internet. At that point, I connected the dots, and wanted to create Weezer's mashup of their favorite popular culture of the internet. A viral music video made of virals." Pork and Beans became a crossover hit. YouTube weirdos loved seeing their culture embraced, and mainstream fans were introduced to a whole new world of content. In these early days, YouTube was still the Wild West when it came to copyright. Fans started to upload existing music videos from established artists, giving audiences a more convenient way of watching the videos they loved, even if the labels didn't approve of it. Like the early days of MTV, these labels didn't see a clear path to make money off of uploading online, so they were slow to adopt. But in 2009, 3 of the 4 biggest record labels conspired to change this reality. Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, and EMI all put aside their differences to create Vivo, a music video streaming service designed to allow them to monetize their videos in the digital world. Talking to CNET in 2009, UMG CEO Doug Morris described their vision for Vivo as MTV on steroids. Vivo would serve as a distributor, licensing out official versions of the video to platforms like YouTube. And Vivo also worked with Google, who had a minority stake, to build out their own platform. The only problem is that their site wasn't good. It was plagued with glitches and missing the catalog of Warner Music, who instead teamed up with MTV to try to create a similar service. But their most egregious transgression was that the site was loaded with ads. In today's advertising-heavy internet, this might seem like an odd breaking point, but back in the day, YouTube had very few ads, and internet audiences had strong feelings about being advertised to. This focus on advertisement meant that the videos themselves needed to stay PG, so many of them were full of awkward censorship. Vivo enjoyed a brief moment in the sun, but before long it had collapsed, and YouTube took over as the internet's home of music videos. If it seems like this whole situation panned out well for YouTube in the end, that's probably because YouTube designed it that way through a series of shrewd and shady business moves. These moves allegedly even include Google botting videos to inflate view counts. In 2018, an anonymous YouTube exec told Vox what their plan had been. YouTube needed Vivo to exist just long enough to become so popular that the labels had no leverage anymore. MTV's site similarly kicked the bucket around the same time. After completely transforming pop culture in the 80s and becoming a media powerhouse, MTV turned its back on the art form that built it. By the time they realized their folly, it was too late and a mighty empire had crumbled. A new age began as YouTube became the de facto home for music videos. In the YouTube age, corporate virality would become the norm, and the weirdos and outcasts that had once populated the platform would be edged out by the enormous power of the mainstream music industry. Ironically enough, the music video that might be most synonymous with the YouTube era was actually a relic of the golden age of MTV. All the way back in 1987, Rick Astley released Never Gonna Give You Up. That song was a surprise worldwide hit. As it climbed the charts, Astley's label rushed to throw together a music video. Like so many 80s videos, Never Gonna Give You Up was put together at the last minute on a pretty tight budget. In an appearance on Graham Norton, Astley explained the clothes he wore in the video were actually his own, hastily assembled from his wardrobe. And while the labels had brought in professional dancers to back Astley, they had no choreography for him, which led to him improvising a strange, jilted and awkward dance that has become so iconic today. Never Gonna Give You Up was successful enough in its day, but it would have been mostly forgotten were it not for a prank by 4chan founder Christopher Poole, aka Moot. In the early days of the image board, Moot set up a filter to change the word egg to duck in 4chan posts, which resulted in egg roll becoming duck roll. 4chan users built on this bit of surreal pranking and started a bait-and-switch meme where they would surreptitiously link people to a JPEG image of a duck on wheels. In 2007, some users started to evolve the so-called duck roll, changing the destination link from that JPEG to the video for Never Gonna Give You Up. This so-called Rickroll caught like a wildfire, spreading beyond the confines of 4chan and across the internet. Soon enough, people all around the world were getting linked to the Never Gonna Give You Up YouTube page. The meme became so big that many can still recognize the video by its hyperlink alone. Today, Never Gonna Give You Up has 1.5 billion views on YouTube. That might sound like a lot, but in truth, Never Gonna Give You Up doesn't even crack the top 100 most viewed music videos on the platform. As a new decade came on and the era of social media and content algorithms emerged, the music video would find itself at the center of cultural discourse once more. Some of the biggest artists in the world would kick off a trend of high-concept, high-budget videos. Others would begin to use the music video for stunning pieces of protest, and new artists would try to tap into the culture of virality to launch themselves into the spotlight. Beyond the mainstream, the onset of technology allowed for the sort of experiments in form that the music video hadn't seen in decades. And after a long time being relatively stable and static, the nature of music videos began to evolve. The decline of MTV began in the 90s, but it truly took hold at the end of the 2000s. By 2009, the channel had nearly abandoned the music video entirely. It averaged just 3 hours of music videos a day, devoting most of their airtime to reality TV shows, including their newest hit, Jersey Shore. The de facto home of music videos was in the process of shifting to YouTube, leaving MTV fans wondering how the company had so magnificently tanked their brand. But despite this classic tale of corporate mismanagement, MTV still controlled one of the biggest nights in the music industry, the Video Music Awards. The VMAs have a rich history of controversy, but the most infamous moment in that entire history may just be the events of September 13th, 2009. That night began with a tribute to Michael Jackson, who had died just months earlier. The tribute acknowledged all that Jackson had done for the art of the music video, and even culminated with Janet Jackson performing Scream, her famous video collaboration with her late brother. But this tribute, which should have been the defining moment of the 2009 VMAs, is now remembered as just an afterthought. And that's because of events that transpired early in the show, during the presentation of the award for Best Female Video. That category was stacked in 2009, featuring videos from a new cohort of pop stars who were in the middle of redefining the genre. Lady Gaga's Poker Face featured Gaga in a slick and sexy futuristic outfit, an iconic look that would help assert her as one of her generation's greatest fashion icons. Katy Perry's Hot and Cold was filled with the cheeky charm that would soon make her one of the best-selling artists of the era. Taylor Swift wrapped a timeless story of star-crossed lovers into a modern hipster rom-com on You Belong With Me, and Beyonce's Single Ladies was a masterpiece of dance, using sharp black and white visuals, careful camera movement, and perfect choreography. Shakira and Taylor Lautner took to the stage to present the award, announcing Taylor Swift as the winner. Chances are, you probably know what happened next.
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. One of the best videos of all time.
Kanye West's antics were likely fueled by the bottle of Hennessy that he'd been swigging from since the red carpet. They threw the entire event into chaos, had Taylor Swift in tears backstage, and completely changed the trajectory of music. Later in that evening, Beyonce would win Video of the Year and invite Swift back on stage to finish her acceptance speech. The entire evening was a wild moment that's forever enshrined in pop culture history, and it's a moment that marks a key intersection of many of the artists who would define the next decade of music videos. This new era would see more artists stretching their ambitions and using videos to convey powerful messages, but it would also see videos become more corporate than ever before. And that decade would prove to be maybe the last moment when the music video was truly at the center of cultural discourse. By the end of the 2010s, the world of the music video would be full of instability, uncertainty, and levels of experimentation not seen since before MTV went on the air. When the internet started to catch on in the new millennium, it brought with it drastic changes to the music industry. In the early 2000s, file sharing caused enormous panic among industry execs and artists alike. And while the greatest focus was on downloading MP3s, there were plenty of videos to be pirated on your service of choice. Rather than accept or embrace this oncoming digital age, music industry executives clung to the old world for dear life, and had to be dragged into the digital world kicking and screaming. Meanwhile, hungry new companies like Twitter and Facebook were eager to jump into the pop cultural discourse. Their platforms made it easier than ever for people to share videos with networks of friends, and cultural events began to unfold in real time, exploding memes to global phenomena. When Michael Jackson died in June 2009, millions flocked to Twitter to discuss it, crashing the servers. A few months later, Kanye's antics at the VMAs had even more flocking to the site to discuss the chaos in real time. and finally, the industry began to catch on. Jim Cantiello, a correspondent and producer for MTV News, told Billboard about the incident in 2019. Kanye storming the stage was the first time I realized just how powerful Twitter was in driving audiences to TV. If you weren't watching the VMAs and you opened up Twitter, it felt like you were missing the craziest TV moment of all time. Viacom executive Van Toffler remembered in the same piece, "We were MTV. We wanted to be almost everything to youth culture, but that night made me realize that social media was not our foe, but our friend. It was like, we just need to feed this beast, and then it can feed television as well." Like Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake years earlier, Kanye's drama was driving people to embrace the online world. One of the most viral music videos in this early age of social media was Rebecca Black's Friday. Friday was the product of Arc Music Factory, a luxury service that wrote bespoke songs and produced music videos for teens that wanted to be pop stars. The video for Friday is exactly as cheesy as one might expect from such a company, filled with cheap video effects and awkward teenage extras. It dropped on YouTube on March 14th, 2011, and immediately started to spread across social media. Mystery Science Theater 3000's Michael J. Nelson tweeted that it was the worst video ever made, feeding the virality and helping to fuel the growing meme. The success of this video was enough to propel Friday onto the Billboard Hot 100 and launched Rebecca Black into a strange and complicated career as a musician/famous meme. And Black was just one of a series of artists from across the musical spectrum who were finding unlikely success thanks to virality. The same year she released Friday, the Australian musician Gautier dropped his video for Somebody That I Used to Know. Somebody That I Used to Know was directed by Natasha Pincus and inspired by a painting created by Gautier's own father. Its stop-motion body painting was simple in concept but grueling in execution. Pincus told the How I Work podcast that the shoot for Somebody That I Used to Know consisted of two of the longest days of her career. The first was 18 hours of stop-motion photography as skin painter Emma Hack painted the backdrop and Gautier's face. And that was just the prelude. They followed it up with a 26-hour shoot that pushed everyone on the set both physically and mentally. Guest vocalist Kimbra fainted partway through the shoot, and Pincus spent so long staring at the set that she started to see triangles all over the white floor and even on her own hands and arms. In the end, all of this work paid dividends. The video went viral, and Somebody That I Used to Know became a mega hit, topping charts around the world and inspiring countless covers and parodies. While Gautier stepped back from the spotlight after this unexpected success, other artists were using viral YouTube videos to launch into huge careers that continue to this day. Lana Del Rey used her videos to establish an aesthetic language that made her a standout star in a crowded pop scene. Macklemore's wacky thrift shop vaulted him from the indie underground to the mainstream rap world. And it wasn't just rising stars. Established artists were cashing in on virality with their own meme videos. In 2015, Drake's Hotline Bling, directed by Hype Williams' protege Director X, went viral for Drake's awkward dad dancing, and stills from that video are still regularly memed to this day. 2013 saw the release of Lil Jon and DJ Snake's Turn Down for What, a video that introduced much of the world to the Daniels, who would go on to create the Academy Award-winning Everything Everywhere All at Once. In an interview with Vice, Daniel Kwan explained the vision that he and Daniel Scheinert had for the video. For a while, Daniel and I had been wanting to explore male sexuality in a really weird way. For some reason, our brains came up with this image and this other universe where dudes are so pumped up on their own dicks and they're so into their testosterone that the way they show that is by breaking shit with their dicks.
Turn down for what? Turn down for what? Turn down for what?
In addition to directing the video, Kwan also starred in Turn Down for What, wearing a protective cup as he thrust into everything in sight. He told Vice that it proved to be a painful role. I was actually smashing my dick on things, and I actually broke them. There's this huge bruise around my dick on my thighs from where the cup was cutting into me, but I had bruises everywhere on my body, because all of those falls you see, I was actually busting through drywall, wood, all that stuff. So that was awful. In 2012, YouTube saw the release of maybe the biggest viral music video of all time, Psy's Gangnam Style.
Oppan Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style.
When he released Gangnam Style, Psy was already a veteran of Korea's video-heavy music scene. He had no plans to break through internationally, and Gangnam Style was not targeted for a global audience at all, with its mostly Korean lyrics full of Korean cultural references. But the video was so sharp and captured the aesthetics and sensibilities of the time so perfectly that it blew up immediately upon upload. Within 1 day of release on YouTube, Gangnam Style had racked up 500,000 views, and it soared from there. This kind of bright color scheme and surreal randomness was in vogue during the early 2010s, with Psy's visuals feeling like an amped up version of LMFAO's party rock anthem. And maybe most importantly, the video featured a memorable, easily recognizable dance. Put together, all of this had the video spreading like wildfire. View count soared, and Gangnam Style eventually became the first video ever to be viewed more than 1 billion times on YouTube. The success of Gangnam Style even bled into Psy's next video release, Gentleman, which surpassed 38 million views in its first 24 hours. That 24-hour view count had been adopted as a benchmark for music video records by Vivo in 2012. Though it's worth noting, Vivo didn't acknowledge Psy's record, as he wasn't affiliated with Vivo until 4 days after Gentleman's release. The video that first established this record was Nicki Minaj's Stupid Ho, which racked up nearly 5 million views in its first day. At the time, that seemed impressive, but online music videos were on the rise through the middle of the 2010s. In the 5 years following Stupid Ho, the 24-hour Vivo record would change hands 10 times. And the videos that broke the record stand as some of the clearest documents of 2010s culture to this day. In 2013, Miley Cyrus hit 10.7 million views in 24 hours with We Can't Stop, a video that debuted a new adult persona for the one-time child star.
We can't stop, and we won't stop. We run things don't run. We don't take nothing from nobody.
The video for We Can't Stop helped establish a visual language that would dominate the era. This language was full of fast cuts, blatant product placement, and visual vignettes that were vaguely related to a central theme. The pace and style of this new visual language was inherently tied to the rising technology of the smartphone. We Can't Stop's director, Diane Martel, told Grantland in June of 2013 that she and Miley wanted the video to be like one giant, trippy selfie. She added, "This video is fucked up and fun. It's like a long vine." This kind of dialogue between video creators and media platforms continues to define the music video to this day. One of the more controversial aspects of We Can't Stop was Miley Cyrus's twerking. Twerking, in its many names and iterations, was a dance move that had been in use in hip-hop for decades and had been central to many hip-hop videos. Cyrus's use of the move was decried by many as cultural appropriation, while others took issue with the general sexuality of it. This controversy would follow Cyrus into her next video, Wrecking Ball.
I came in like a wrecking ball. I never hit so hard in love.
That video saw Cyrus grab the 24-hour Vivo record back from One Direction, who had eclipsed We Can't Stop with their best song ever. Miley Cyrus's nudity was no doubt one of the reasons for Wrecking Ball's success, but in interviews at the time, Cyrus said the video was not intended to be sexual. She told Z100 that the video was actually about emotional vulnerability. If people can take the minds out of the obvious and go into their imagination a little bit and see what the video really means and the way it's so vulnerable, and actually, if you look in my eyes, I look more sad than my voice sounds on the record. It was a lot harder to do the video than it was to record the songs. Many didn't resonate with that message. Instead, they complained about obscenity and started a culture war that only drove the video's virality further. Sinead O'Connor even wrote an open letter in Rolling Stone about the video, which featured references to her Nothing Compares to You. O'Connor wrote, "I am extremely concerned for you that those around you have led you to believe, or encouraged you in your own belief, that it is in any way cool to be naked and licking sledgehammers in your video. Please, in future, say no when you are asked to prostitute yourself." The complexities of the story are exacerbated by the fact that its director, Terry Richardson, is a self-admitted pervert who has a long rap sheet full of allegations of sexual misconduct. Cyrus's own opinions on Wrecking Ball have changed a lot in the years since its release. In a 2017 interview with the Zach Sang Show, she said, "That's something you can't take away. Swinging around naked on a wrecking ball lives forever. I'm never living that down. I'll always be the naked girl on a wrecking ball. I should have thought about how long that was gonna have to follow me around. That's my worst nightmare, is that being played at my funeral." Ever since the earliest days of the medium, human sexuality had been intrinsically tied to the music video. From sultry scopitones to Madonna's self-assured sexuality to the misogyny in hip-hop's bling era, the role of women's bodies in music videos has always been an intense topic of debate. There's perhaps no video that encapsulates this discussion better than Robin Thicke and Pharrell's 2013 Blurred Lines. Two versions of that video were made. An uncensored version, which saw Thicke and Pharrell dancing around with nude models, and a clean version which had the models in skin-colored underwear. Owing in part to the song's questionable lyrics, Blurred Lines drew a ton of criticism, and many still hold it as one of music's most misogynist videos to this day. But the director, Diane Martel, had a different perspective. She explained to Grantland, "I wanted to deal with the misogynist, funny lyrics in a way where the girls were going to overpower the men. I directed the girls to look in the camera. This is very intentional, and they do it most of the time. They are in the power position. I don't think the video is sexist. The lyrics are ridiculous, but the guys are silly as fuck." But even Martel admitted that her goal with the video was not to make a profound feminist statement, but rather to sell records. "I want to make videos that sell records. This is my main focus right now. Not to make videos that express my own obsessions, but to make videos that move units." For better or worse, the female body has proven to move units over the years. As sexual norms became more liberal in the 2010s, it gained more power than ever. One of the artists with the most creative uses of her body in music videos was Lady Gaga. While Gaga wears plenty of sultry outfits and explores female sexuality, her videos are stranger and more elevated than many of her contemporaries. Alejandro sees her dancing in underwear, but also has her fitting in references to Madonna's Vogue and visuals that seem inspired by interwar Germany. She wears a bra with a machine gun on it and dons an elaborate, uncanny outfit that borders on steampunk. Gaga continued this trend in her queer anthem Born This Way. Much of that video reads like a Britney Spears video, but these sections are juxtaposed with strange futuristic outfits that seem to be questioning the way that we view women's bodies and female sexuality. Gaga's work is an interrogation of the way that bodies are depicted in the music video and a celebration of the high fashion world. Her influence stretched across pop, with pop stars donning elaborate outfits on red carpets and in music videos throughout the early 2010s. One artist who clearly took a page from Gaga's influence was Nicki Minaj, who adopted glam looks in videos like Bees in the Trap. Minaj was also happy to explore more conventional sexuality in her videos. 2014's Anaconda was carefully designed to sell records through an overt sexuality while maintaining a level of female empowerment.
My anaconda don't want none unless you got buns, hun.
In 2014, director Colin Tilley told XXL about the vision. "I had a specific way I wanted to shoot Nicki for this. It was definitely all about female empowerment and making sure we capture the right dancers to surround her." He described the vision as Gilligan's Island meets the original Baby Got Back video. It was a perfect vehicle for Minaj's sex-positive feminism and a brilliant marketing strategy for the internet age. Anaconda soared to 19.6 million views in its first day, snatching the record from Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball. Apparently, The Jungle was in the mid-2010s because alongside Anaconda, one of the most successful videos of the era was Katy Perry's Roar. While that video was decidedly more tame than Anaconda, it still featured Katy Perry in a sultry outfit, and paired that with her own brand of female empowerment. Roar was the culmination of a streak of videos that had Katy Perry dominating YouTube in the early 2010s. Her videos for Teenage Dream were delightful servings of camp that captured the bright and cheery optimism of the era, but Roar would mark the peak of her success. Perry began to fall off after a public falling out and feud with her one-time friend Taylor Swift in 2014. That drama would help inspire the next video to set a Vivo 24-hour record, Bad Blood.
Cause baby, now we got bad blood. You know it used to be mad love. So take a look what you've done. Cause baby, now we got bad blood. Hey!
Bad Blood was directed by Joseph Kahn of Toxic fame and casts Taylor Swift and her entourage of celebrity friends as secret agents in a cheeky action movie homage. Each of the characters is introduced by a codename that was actually chosen by the actors or musicians themselves. Bad Blood is just one of a series of iconic videos from Swift's landmark album, 1989. Swift had been on the rise and had a series of celebrated videos before 1989, including the VMA-winning I Knew You Were Trouble, but 1989 pushed her to a new level of superstardom, thanks in no small part to its videos. Alongside Bad Blood, Kahn also directed the video for Blank Space, which won 2 VMAs and has since become one of the most viewed videos on YouTube. He brought techniques from cinematic giants like Spielberg and Kubrick into his video for Blank Space. The whole thing is built on visual language established in Hollywood film, switching seamlessly between dolly, handheld, and Steadicam shots to depict the characters' interior worlds. It also relies heavily on symmetrical shots, which Kahn told MTV News were his homage to Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. There's a lot of symmetrical framing that's Kubrickian, which is a really funny way to approach a pop video, but it's there if you look at the way there's center framing and symmetry throughout the whole thing. This might seem like a strange choice, but it perfectly conveys the video's message, which imagines Taylor Swift as a violent sociopath. Blank Space was one of a number of videos at the time that tried to push the medium as well. Alongside the video, Swift released an app which allowed fans to explore an immersive 360-degree view of Oheka Castle, the mansion used for the setting in the video. This virtual exploration would have fans unearthing details of Swift's personal life and childhood, strengthening the parasocial bonds that helped to make her such an enormous pop star. Many of her videos were full of these kinds of Easter eggs and hidden references, which fed a growing army of Swifties who would flock to online spaces to discuss the minutiae of her videos. In addition to referencing her own life, Swift's videos comment on and parody her pop contemporaries. Shake It Off, directed by Mark Romanek, sees clear references to Lady Gaga and Skrillex. Swift used her videos to exert careful control over her image, building out a distinct aesthetic for each new release. At the 2017 VMAs, Taylor Swift premiered Look What You Made Me Do, which saw her adopt a darker persona, killing off her older versions in a send-up of the wild media theories around her. Look What You Made Me Do was an exercise in opulence and saw Swift sitting in a tub of actual diamonds and jewelry worth more than $12 million. That video took 7 months to shoot, and somehow, despite her rabid fanbase, she and her team were able to keep it on lock without word of it leaking. When it finally released, Look What You Made Me Do gave Taylor Swift her second 24-hour Vivo record, with its 43.2 million views ending the 674-day run of Adele's Hello. Some interpreted shots in Look What You Made Me Do as jabs against Kanye West, who had reignited his feud with Swift a year earlier with Famous. For his part, Kanye West was enjoying his own enormous success and leaving his mark on music videos throughout the 2010s. After the 2009 VMA incident, Kanye West stepped away from the spotlight and holed up in Oahu, Hawaii to work on an album that would become My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. That album, which Kanye described to the New York Times as a backhanded apology for his antics, wowed the music world and was released alongside Runaway, an extended short film inspired by the great music films of the past like The Wall, Purple Rain, and Thriller. That video tells the story of a phoenix, played by model Salida Ebanks, who falls to Earth and falls in love with Kanye. It was written and directed by Kanye himself, who had a distinct vision for the project, but maybe unsurprisingly, had a strange direction style. Ebanks explained to Vulture, "The way he operates, everything is in his mind. He tries to verbally explain it. He's a great director, gives great instructions, very patient. When he wasn't on set was when the chaos started. Because of our conversations, I knew the scenes exactly, and when he wasn't on set, it was hard for me to explain. So pretty much nothing happened when he wasn't on set." The project was made possible by a number of high-profile collaborations, including Hype Williams, who wrote a screenplay for it, and performance artist Vanessa Beecroft, who served as the art director. One of the most impressive sequences from the film came in the video section for Runaway, which used a distinct color palette and a troupe of ballerinas to add a touch of class to Kanye's self-aggrandizing anthem.
Let's have a toast for the douchebags. Let's have a toast for the Let's have a toast for the scumbags. Every one of them
For Power, Kanye worked with installation and video artist Marco Brambilla to create a mini video that depicted only 94 seconds of the 5-minute long song. That video imagines Kanye as the centerpiece of a sort of living Renaissance painting, loaded with occult imagery and powerful symbolism. Power and Runaway exemplified Kanye's main goal at the time, the elevation of hip-hop into high art. While there had been plenty of celebrated hip-hop videos over the years, the music had been historically seen as lower class and not accepted by the world of the wealthy and powerful. Kanye helped to change that by mixing high fashion and cutting-edge art with his opulent music. He was joined in this endeavor a year later by Jay-Z, who collaborated with Kanye on Watch the Throne. That album proved to be a renaissance for Jay-Z and helped establish him as hip-hop's elder statesman. The last single from Watch the Throne was No Church in the Wild, a video that juxtaposes the high art imagery of Greek sculpture with gritty images of rioters facing off against police. Following his collaborations with Kanye, Jay-Z threw himself further into the avant-garde. In 2013, he and director Mark Romanek put together a performance art piece for his single Picasso Baby. Inspired by Marina Abramovich's The Artist is Present, that video sees Jay-Z present himself as a piece of art, rapping the song in the middle of an art gallery while he engages with fans. He would step up the experimentation on his next album, 2017's 444. 444 was released with little pomp or circumstance, simply announced with a cryptic billboard. When people speculated that it was an album, Jay-Z's team cut a trailer together to throw off the scent. Jay-Z told Vulture, "I was like, okay, let's be an asshole. Let's throw a curveball. Now you don't know if it's an album, a video, or a film." In truth, 444 was a bit of all three. Its so-called music videos were a series of experimental short films, some of which would play for upwards of 10 minutes before dropping a portion of their song over the end of the film, or even just over the credits.
My sister Hattie and little nephews, cousins, and TT. Eric the rest of B for whatever she wants to do. She might start an institute, she might put poor kids in school. My stake in Rock Nation should go to you.
These films packaged themselves as music videos as a way to backdoor audiences into watching politically driven short films about the Black experience. Films that probably would not have gotten nearly as many eyes on them if they hadn't been packaged as music videos. Even the most conventional video from the project, Story of OJ, was released alongside a companion mini-doc in which a series of Black celebrities talked about their own experiences with race and fame in America. Experiences that echo the message of the song itself. The visuals of Story of OJ are a direct reference to the history of racist animation and performance that played such an enormous role in developing the art of the music video in the first place.
Light nigga, dark nigga, faux nigga, real nigga, rich nigga, po nigga, house nigga, feel nigga, still nigga, still nigga.
444 was a late career triumph from Jay-Z, and a sign that artists were imagining new modes for a medium that was now nearly 40 years old. It was no doubt influenced immensely by Lemonade, an acclaimed visual album dropped a year earlier by Jay-Z's wife, Beyonce. Dating back to the 90s, Beyonce had thrived in dozens of music videos, both as a member of Destiny's Child and as a solo performer. She won her first solo VMA back in 2003 with Crazy in Love, and her video repertoire grew from there. As Beyonce gained more and more control over her solo career, her videos grew more sophisticated, displaying distinct fashion and unmatched choreography. 2009's Single Ladies, the video that spawned the Kanye-Taylor Swift feud, is an example of this. Beyonce adapted much of that video from Mexican Breakfast, a piece put together by the 9-time Tony Award-winning choreographer Bob Fosse for The Ed Sullivan Show in 1969. Beyonce had seen the video on YouTube and came up with the idea of adapting it into something that would be simultaneously vintage and modern. She told The Times that the shoot was done on a tight budget. "We spent all the budget on the video for If I Were a Boy, and with this song we didn't even have a treatment. So it's the least expensive video I've done. Not for a moment did I think, this is gonna be a movement." It shines despite a low budget because of Beyonce's perfectionist drive. The rehearsals for Single Ladies took a month and a half and saw Beyonce audition a small army of backup dancers. When it came time to do the dance, Beyonce and her dancers were dancing so hard that they kept breaking the heels off of their shoes. But this work was worth it, as Single Ladies won Best Video at the VMAs and stands as one of the most memorable dances of its era to this day. Single Ladies wouldn't be the last time Beyonce pulled influence from a YouTube dance video. 2011's Run the World, Girls, was inspired by the Mozambican dance group Tofo Tofo. After seeing their video on YouTube and falling in love, Beyonce flew Tofo Tofo to LA and had them teach her their moves for Run the World. She even featured them in the final video, a piece directed by Francis Lawrence and built on a revolutionary chic look. Beyonce's seemingly effortless dance moves elevated the videos from 4, helping the album soar to an eventual 4 times platinum certification. And just as it seemed Beyonce couldn't climb any higher, she shocked the world in 2013 by surprise dropping a complete visual album. Like Rhythm Nation 1814, the visuals of Beyonce's self-titled project played directly into the music itself, with Beyonce tweaking songs in the studio to better fit the footage she and her collaborators were getting. Those collaborations included a who's who of celebrated video directors, including Hype Williams, Jake Nava, and Jonas Åkerlund, but it was all pulled together under the vision of Beyonce herself. Beyonce's longtime makeup artist Sir John explained to Harper's Bazaar, "Beyonce collaborates with Beyonce, and we throw something in the mix. There's always a really robust storyboard and conversation there. She's quite collaborative in that sense, but she knows what she wants. She knows what she wants very immediately." This singular vision would be refined even further 3 years later as Beyonce dropped her second visual album, Lemonade. Lemonade is a stunning exploration of black feminism, diving into Beyonce's experiences dealing with a Jay-Z affair, as well as her own personal history and the wider state of American politics. It features no shortage of powerful imagery, from Beyonce smashing cars with a baseball bat on Hold Up to Beyonce throwing up the bird while sitting on a throne in Sorry, but the most celebrated imagery from the project came in Formation.
My daddy Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama. I like my baby hair with baby hair.
Formation was a key part of a cultural discourse going on in America throughout the middle 2010s. The Black Lives Matter movement had raised awareness of police brutality and systemic racism, and America was in the midst of a difficult conversation about its bleak history of racial relations. Formation might be Beyonce's strongest contribution to that conversation. The concept for the video was all Beyonce's, but it came together thanks to close work with her frequent collaborator, Melina Matsoukas. Beyonce may have chosen Matsoukas because of her reputation as a somewhat controversial director, having directed videos like Rihanna's S&M and No Doubt's Looking Hot. Matsoukas told The New Yorker, "I like to create provocative imagery. Sometimes it works and sometimes it goes awry. And the imagery in Formation is certainly provocative. Among its cavalcade of shocking images are shots that evoke the failed responses to Hurricane Katrina, shots of a child dancing in front of a police lineup, and a sort of black reclamation of southern plantation imagery. The video combines documentarian-style camcorder and archival footage with elaborate sets and costumes to create a strange sort of spliced-together alternate reality. The shot of a man on horseback with spurred Adidas and a black Stetson was inspired by Matsoukas' own grandfather, an Afro-Cuban preacher and musician who rode in rodeos in Harlem and the Bronx. Formation is influenced by black literature like Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and Octavia Butler. Matsoukas explained, "I wanted to show this is black people. We triumph, we suffer, we're drowning, we're being beaten, we're dancing, we're eating, and we're still here." As black artists got more and more autonomy, many of them began to work on elaborate visual projects that explored their unique experiences navigating American society. Janelle Monáe released their own visual album with Dirty Computer, a piece of dystopian Afrofuturism that lives on Monáe's eccentric voice and singular style. The Weeknd created a miniature cinematic universe and produced a series of videos that told a story exploring the commodification of black bodies. Run the Jewels oscillated between heavy videos exploring America's visceral violence and lighthearted videos satirizing the country's failing political system. One of the most celebrated political music video makers was Kendrick Lamar. All Right opened with a music clip exclusive to the video, which ran under a powerful image of cops carrying Kendrick and his crew like royalty in a litter. For Free starts light and satirical, but grows manic and paranoid, culminating in Kendrick chasing a woman around while wearing an Uncle Sam costume. But the most striking video from Kendrick's oeuvre might be the Dave Meyers-directed Humble. Rather than the clear, direct protest of Formation or Close Your Eyes and Count to Fuck, Humble presents a collection of dreamlike images that invite the viewer to create their own interpretations. Some, like Kendrick with a dozen sniper lasers trailed on him, or Kendrick at a Last Supper, have a clear meaning, but others live more in the abstract. The online world opened communities up to more speculative discussion as to the true intent of these sort of abstract videos. It's that sort of speculation that helped Childish Gambino's This Is America become such an enormous cultural moment. When Childish Gambino dropped This Is America, it wasn't as part of a promotional cycle or album release, but rather just as a singular video drop. And while you can listen to the song on its own, I think that in most people's mind, This Is America lives as a music video first and everything else second. That video was directed by Hiro Murai, who said it was influenced by films like Mother and City of God. It's an elaborate piece held together by long tracking shots and Donald Glover's visceral dance moves. At its core, the video comments on America's problem of gun violence, but its chaotic and often esoteric imagery is constantly suggesting that there are bigger things at play. Glover dances through at least 10 different viral dances, perhaps commentating on the desensitization to violence brought on by the digital age. The song's lyrics give little help in any interpretations, while the bouncy music creates a strange and dark juxtaposition. This Is America dominated cultural discourse for months, with countless online commentators throwing in their own interpretations and analysis. Everything about it embodied the daring cinematic videos of the late 2010s, but it stands as one of the last videos to truly have that kind of cultural impact. As the 2010s wound down, the long reign of the music videos seemed to be winding down too. As Mike the Snare recently pointed out in his video, The Death of the Music Video, people just are not watching and talking about music videos like they used to. Just look at the 24-hour Vivo record. In the 7 years between 2012 and 2019, that record has changed hands 13 times, with the threshold rising from just under 5 million views to more than 65 with Taylor Swift's Me. But that 65 million record has stood for more than 5 years. And it's not because artists have stopped making videos. Both within the mainstream and without, there are still plenty of artists creating stunning experimental projects. It's just that audiences sort of stopped caring in the same way. Video drops from artists like Beyonce, Ariana Grande, and Taylor Swift used to be enormous events. Now they're kind of afterthoughts. Of course, these artists don't represent the entirety of the music video by any measure. Throughout the series, I've mostly focused on videos coming out of the English-speaking world, but there are other video traditions across the world that are still rich and thriving. K-pop is as big as it's ever been, with its whole industry relying heavily on carefully designed dance videos that sell its stars unique visions and personalities. Bollywood continues to be enormous both in India and across the wider globe, with new videos regularly racking up views in the hundreds of millions. And Latin music is in the midst of a historic boom, brought on by a new generation of artists who aren't shying away from their own video releases. But even amidst all these rising tides, it's abundantly clear that the form of music videos is changing. Really, that form has been changing for over a decade now. Back in the late 2000s, as YouTube was taking over from MTV, another shift was happening in the music video world. Visionary directors and programmers realized that the online world allowed for all new kinds of experimentation. A number of artists launched interactive 360-degree videos that let viewers become their own sort of director, and others sought to push things even further. Chris Milk is a director and immersive artist who created some of the most stunning projects of the era. In 2010, Milk created the Johnny Cash Project, a crowdsourced video that let people draw their own frames and assemble their own video for the late Cash's Ain't No Grave. The result was a haunting video that brought Cash's spirit back to life, while displaying just how many people his music has touched. 2010 also saw Milk work with Arcade Fire to create The Wilderness Downtown, a project that played with the visual space of browser windows. The Wilderness Downtown personalized the music video, using Google Maps to juxtapose real images of the viewer's home growing up with shots of a shadowy figure running through suburbs. mashups. Arcade Fire would embrace the interactive video wholeheartedly over the next few years, while Milk continued his own experiments, eventually dabbling into the emergent technology of VR. In 2013, Sony teamed up with the interactive video platform Echo to create a video for Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone, which had viewers switch between TV channels, all of which were lip-syncing to the song. While these sorts of interactive videos never became the norm, the rest of the decade would see interactive videos by the likes of Coldplay, Jack White, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Major Lazer. These interactive videos are some of the most drastic experiments in video form since early innovators developed the music video itself, but they've suffered the same setback as so many of those early proto-videos: lack of a clear platform. Each of these videos was hosted on their own sites with no real centralized repository of interactive videos. That worked for a time, but as the internet shifted away from being comprised of websites toward being comprised mostly of platforms, many of these fell by the wayside. A lot of interactive videos have tragically become too slow and buggy to engage with, and some have even disappeared from the web entirely. But this spirit of interactivity continues with new kinds of experiments like Fortnite live concerts, which blend the medium of the music video with that of the video game and live music itself. And then of course there's the rhythm game, which is its own sort of spin-off of the music video. Other new forms have found more comfortable homes on YouTube. The lyric video, which can arguably be traced all the way back to Bob Dylan, erupted in the early internet thanks to the popularity of fan edits. Soon enough, major labels were latching onto the medium, which allowed them to create visual accompaniments at a fraction of the budget of a music video. The quality and nature of lyric videos differs drastically, with some being little more than slideshows, while you could make arguments that some are full-on videos themselves. This same diversity can be felt in another new medium, the visualizer. Like lyric videos, visualizers are lower effort visuals that are mostly designed to be watched in the background, as many people now use YouTube as their primary means of listening to music. This new form is descended from another relic of the early digital age, the built-in visualizers of old media players. While that kind of media player has bit the dust, YouTube is full of these new sort of song visualizers. Some contain loops of relatively simple images, but there are others that arguably have a higher production value than many of the earliest MTV videos. We can once again see how the platforms that host music videos are shaping the medium, and throwing things that were once clear up for debate. Is there really a difference between a music video and a lyric video? At what point does a visualizer become a video? But the greatest thing throwing the future of the music video into question isn't the visualizer or the lyric video. It's a new platform entirely: TikTok. TikTok was born in 2017 as a spin-off of the Chinese platform Douyin. It quickly rose to become the most popular social media in the world, and a new generation's home for music on video. But unlike MTV or YouTube, the videos that thrive on TikTok aren't really music videos. They're crowdsourced dance videos being eternally remixed by millions of fans across the globe. This new kind of decentralized video is fully changing the way that we think of music and video together, and it's shaken the industry to its core. Rather than invest in complex video shoots, more and more in the industry are relying on TikTok audiences to do that work for them. There are plenty of songs that are better known for TikTok dances than their own videos, and plenty of new songs don't even have videos at all. But there are some artists that are finding ways to reconcile the tradition of the music video with this new medium. Rosalia's album, Motomami, is one of the most interesting projects in recent years. Motomami was released as a live event on TikTok, but it borrows from the language of the music video and even seems to include references to famous videos. One of the most interesting things about it is its deliberate use of the vertical aspect ratio, something that is only going to become more common in the years to come. Motomami shows that even as the music video is becoming less relevant than it has been in decades, there are still artists willing to push the form and find new ways of conveying their messages visually. There is absolutely no question that the nature of the music video is changing in a post-TikTok era. But despite its diminished role, I don't believe the music video is going away. Humankind has always been drawn to the combination of sight and sound. From folk dance to opera, from the illustrated song to the modern music video, we love the magic that comes from this kind of hybridity. And we have good reason to. The introduction of video to song lets us convey new meanings that change music itself. It lets us transport ourselves to new worlds or imagine new ways of being. It lets us turn the mundane into the spectacular and lets us witness truly unbelievable feats. It lets us speak truth to power, and even lets us live on beyond the grave. Over its century-long history, the music video has completely transformed the industry and stretched its influence into the wider culture beyond. It's birthed a catalog so rich and so deep that even in these 7 episodes, I've only scratched the surface of all that people have been able to accomplish with it. The story of the music video is the story of human ingenuity made manifest. And it's a story that I don't think is going to end anytime soon.